Good evening, Wakefield. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Wakefield Town Council of March 10th, 2025 at 6:01 p.m. I would ask my councilors and other attendees to recite the Pledge of Allegiance together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We have a quorum, so we're going to move forward. We have 6 councilors in attendance tonight, 5 here, and Councilor Robert Vincent is attending remote. Councilor Butler is not yet arrived. We first need an executive session. I'm going to ask for a motion that we leave the regular session and go into executive session to discuss contracts because open session may be detrimental to the bargaining position of the town, and then we will return to open session immediately thereafter. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we now move into executive session for the reasons as you just stated.
Second.
We have a motion seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Any discussion before the roll call vote? Seeing none. Councilor Vincent?
Yes.
Councilor Butt?
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Councilor Chines?
Yes.
Councilor Carney?
Yes.
And I am a yes. That Sherry is 6-0. We will now go into executive session.
I hope I'll see you on the other side. I'll try.
We'll be looking for you.
Inviting us. My name is Jim Fitzgerald. I'm the current Vice President for TSF, the Scholarship Foundation, and I'm here with Mark Gagne, a high school senior. And before I got here a little bit early, and I took the temperature of the room here, and it seems like everyone knows what TSF is and gives a thumbs up to what we do. So that's great. So 65 years ago, some wise forefathers planted a seed with the intent of providing scholarship money, need-based scholarship money for those seeking secondary education, whether that be college or trade school, whatever. And that began with a modest $3,700 that, if you fast forward to today, 2025, is now in excess of $22 million. And by the numbers, 13,000 Wakefield student recipients have received scholarships totaling $17 million over that period of time. And the average award today is between $1,000 and $5,000. So this year we anticipate awarding $820,000 to roughly 300 Wakefield High School students. So, and understand, this is all going to Wakefield High School, Wakefield residents. So, March 15th, this weekend, we are having our annual appeal. In the past, it was a phone-a-thon. Now, with the demise of landlines and the resurgence of cell phones, we don't do a phone-a-thon anymore. So what we do is we do we canvass the town and do a mailing, a mass mailing, and Mark will tell you a little bit about that later. The Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light has helped us greatly in the past by allowing us to put some of our literature in the gas and light bills. That helps us, and of course this mailing goes a long way with that as well. One other item, this is our 65th year since its inception, and October the 23rd we will have an anniversary festivities at the 4 Points Sheraton, and that's October the 23rd. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. I am Mark Gagne, and I am a student director of the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield. This Saturday, March 15th, we expect to have our 29 TSF student directors on social media sharing information about the TSF Annual Appeal fundraiser. Throughout the event, we will be sharing Facebook and Instagram posts with updates and facts about TSF. We will gather at the Civic Center to assemble this annual appeal mailing, which will include information about TSF as well as details on how to donate to this great cause. We hope that everyone will respond favorably to our most important fundraiser of the entire year, and we hope to be able to surpass the $44,000 that we raised at last year's event. On behalf of the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield, we would like the Town Council to endorse our TSF Annual Appeal fundraiser, and we also ask that you please designate the week of March 10th through March 15th as the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield Annual Appeal Week in Wakefield. Thank you very much.
Questions from counselors?
No, I just want to, I've been there for the whole 65 years. I remember when two lawyers in Wakefield started it, Mr. Lee, who they named the town hall after, and Mo Frankel. And back then it was small money, and what you've done, Mr. Fitzgerald, sir, and young man, is incredible, the amount of money you're giving out today. That's it's a compliment to the town of Wakefield, and we appreciate it.
Councilor Chines.
I just want to add to that. I'm amazed every year when we talk about the numbers and the resources that are available to Wakefield students. I mean, $800,000 for a community our size in scholarships is incredible. And, you know, as someone who didn't grow up in Wakefield and, you know, grew up in a community that didn't have something like the Scholarship Foundation, I really appreciate the life-changing impact that you have. So I think, you know, thinking back to kind of the founders of this effort 65 years ago and the foresight they had is amazing, but also thinking about all the people over the years, including the two of you that have sustained this and grown this fund and moved it forward. It really is inspiring, and it's just a testament to really the best of Wakefield. So thank you for everything that you do.
Councilor Dombrowski.
You do incredible work. Mark and all the rest of the student directors, what you're doing is making a huge impact for so many people in our community, and they're your peers. And you are stepping into shoes that in the 64 years prior, you know, have been as committed. So it's great to see you here tonight with Mr. Fitzgerald on that. I do also want to mention that for anyone watching, your website as well, tsfofwakefield.org. So the scholarship, right? The Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield.org is another place people can go to get information and I believe donate as well. So watch for the mailers, watch on social media, or jump online now, tsfofwakefield.org. Right. Thank you. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mark. And you should be very proud of what you're all doing here because you're having real impact. Thank you.
Any other comments from councilors?
Mr.
Councilor
Chair,
Chines?
if there are no other comments, I'll make a motion to endorse the annual appeal and to declare March 10th through March 15th as annual appeal week for the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll do roll call because we've got Councilor Vincent on the screen. Councilor Vincent?
Yes.
Councilor Butt?
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski?
Enthusiastically, yes.
Councilor Chines?
Yes.
And Councilor Carney?
Yes.
And I too am a yes. That's 6-0. Sherry. I do the golf tournament. Not well, but I've done that a number of years. And Matt, when do you, or Mark, right? Mark, when do you expect the mailing to go out? Do you have a kind of a time frame that people can be looking out for their,
Next week.
the good news of their bill?
Yeah,
From Gaston.
It's special, it's sorted by the USPS, so
Okay.
as soon as they can get it.
So that'll be
it's all-
next cycle. It's coming
Yes,
out.
yes.
Great,
Yeah.
good to know.
Yes.
Good to know. Well, thank you both for coming in. If we've taken enough of your time, but again, as has been said by all, thank you very much for the work you do. And this is a great program, and we really appreciate the time you put in. Because these things don't just happen. You have to have volunteers. So kudos to both of you and everybody else that works with you.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
good luck this
Thank you.
week.
Thank you.
Yeah, and good luck.
Thank you.
Item 7, we have a pledge of license for Caparelli's Fine Wine and Spirits. Do we have, Sherry, anybody appearing for this, or is this more administrative?
No, we have Attorney Greg DeMarcus on with us right now. Hi, Greg, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. Can't see you. Yeah.
I'm
but-
trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing in the video.
There you
Oh,
go.
I did it.
You got
I
it.
did
Darn technology.
Okay. I would hate to deprive you of this handsome view. So, I represent the entity that purchased Caparelli's Fine Wine and Spirits at 29 Broadway recently. And they have a loan with Savers Bank. And Savers Bank, as a requirement of the loan, is requiring a pledge on the liquor license. And that's all this is. There's nothing else changing. That's the only thing we're asking for, is the approval of the bank's pledge. Let me see, Savers Cooperative Bank, excuse me, Savers Cooperative Bank is the name of the bank.
That's Savers, S-A-V-E-R-S.
SAVERS Cooperative Bank, yes.
Yeah, I was just in Buffalo, and I thought for a minute you were talking about the Sabres Cooperative
Oh,
Bank.
no.
I didn't know Buffalo Sabres had a bank. All righty.
Leave those guys.
Any questions from councilors on this pledge? Councilor Carney?
Yes, I've been to the new location, and I've frequented it over the years, and they've cleaned it up very nicely. It's a new look, and I wish them well, and I hope we support them.
Thanks.
Councilor Dombrowski?
I'll just say for anyone watching, this is actually a fairly common thing that we've done from time to time. So it's a rather perfunctory step. So with that, I would move that I'd make a motion that we move to grant the request for the bank's pledge of a liquor license as described by the attorney.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion from councilors on this? Seeing none. Councilor Vincent? Can you hear me, Councilor Vincent?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Butt?
I said yes. Sorry.
Gotcha. Councilor Butt?
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Councilor Chines?
Yes.
Councilor Carney?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Thank you very much, Councilor, for your presentation. That's 6-0.
Thank you very much.
All right, you have a good night. We have a number of discussions under item 8. The first 8A is Friends of Lake Quantapowhat speaking about monofilament line and PVC recycling tubes. And council may recall, we had you folks in one other time to kind of kick this off, and here we are again.
Yes, thank you for having us back.
If you could just identify yourselves and launch right in.
Yeah, Bree Reynolds, 41 Spring Street.
Bill Conley, 83 Elm Street.
And I believe we have some slides. Can you see those?
Do we have slides?
Well, you have them in your packet, and
Okay.
they're on the
Okay.
website
Yeah.
for the public as well.
There's
Yeah.
nothing groundbreaking in them, so it's okay if you don't have them pulled up.
No, we have them in our system here.
All right. So the last time we were here, we were looking into the idea of placing recycling receptacles around the lake for fishing line. We'll be pretty brief tonight. With your approval last time, we went ahead to look at a possible plan to do this. So in the fall, we met with Dennis Fazio, Bill and I, at the lake, and we toured the whole lake, essentially. We looked for sites that would be good places to potentially put the receptacles. We relied on Dennis's knowledge of where fishing most often occurs at the lake, as well as our own observations. And we specifically looked for places that were obviously very common for fishing, but also had pre-existing poles to mount the receptacles so that we don't have to add any clutter to the lakeside with additional poles or signage or things like that. Excuse me. And so with Dennis's approval of these sites, we picked 4 possible locations. We thought, given the size of the lake and the specific areas of the locations, that they would be just enough, not too many, not too few. The first one is the berm, which is the end of Willard Road. And we actually found a big ball of fishing line while we were touring the site there, so we figured that might be a good sign. And the next would be the Hall Park Vets Field area. So if you're in the Vets Field parking lot, looking at the lake, to the left of the parking lot, there are a couple signs there. So we would have them placed there so that people could see them coming and going from the main parking lot. The Lower Common, there's an area over by the playground that has a sign sort of near the lakeshore, but not too close. And in Bellinger Park, which I didn't know the name for that park, so if you're unfamiliar also, it's the one at Main Street and Lowell at the northeast end of the lake. There's an information kiosk there that Dennis thought they could attach the receptacle to that kiosk. So each place already has poles in place. It would be very easy for them to install them. So the idea for our plan is that we would build the collection bins. We would pay for the materials and build them ourselves. There are plans through Boat US Foundation's Reel In and Recycle program, so we can follow those plans. They're very simple. It's made out of PVC pipe, and we can paint them any color. So we were thinking of a evergreen, hunter green, sort of a dark green that blends in nicely. We didn't want anything too flashy to take away from the natural beauty of the lake. DPW is offered to perform the installation for those when they're ready. And so we're hoping at some point in this fishing season early on, we would be able to get those up as long as we have approval. And then Friends of Lake Quannapowitt would also take over the monitoring and emptying of the bins year round. We have volunteers who've already stepped up to say that they wanted to do that specific task, who've never volunteered with us before. So it's already drawing people in who are eager to help and get involved. And we basically send the filtered contents of those things. We would go through them by hand, pick out any trash or things that don't count for the recycling program, and send what does count to the Berkeley Conservation Institute in Iowa, where all of this gets sent if you're participating in this Boat US program. And they recycle it into plastic pellets that can be used for all sorts of things. Let's see. We know education and public outreach is a big piece of this, so we have a long list of ideas for that. I don't have to go through the whole list since it's right in front of you, but essentially we want to use as many methods to provide outreach to people as possible, and that's everything from social media to newsletters, partnering with the town and with like-minded organizations like the Environmental Sustainability Committee, the Conservation Commission, just anywhere that we can help spread the word that these receptacles exist. We would like to do that. But also going by hand and reaching out to people who are actively fishing on the lake. So handing out flyers, talking to people. Like I said, we have volunteers who are already really eager to make sure that this is a success. And then outreach to the elementary, middle, and high schools. I wanted to point that out too, since we do have a number of middle and high school students especially who are very eager to fish. I want to make sure that we are educating families as early as possible that this is an option for disposing of those materials. And the last slide is our proposed collection bin. This is just the standard format that you'll see at lots of different marinas and lake shores around the US. It's made out of PVC pipe, so like I said, we can paint it any color. We're going for that natural green sort of look. And these examples have a number of stickers on them, but we're hoping to just place one pretty simplified sticker so that it's a very simple message. We would love to have Town of Wakefield included on that sticker so everyone knows that this is a partnership. But we're happy to take any ideas or suggestions for the sticker for that. One idea that did come up after we submitted this was actually removing the Spanish component on there and instead having a QR code that would go to the Friends of Lake Quannapowitt website where we could have the information in multiple languages so that whoever is fishing, you know, when they go to that QR code would be able to get the information in sort of the main languages of different groups that fish at the lake. And that's that. We tried to keep it brief.
You did. You did a wonderful job. Questions from the counselors on this? Councilor Dombrowski?
Thank you for the presentation. And I'll just say, I can't think of a project that FOLQ has done that hasn't been a great improvement to our community. You are just the epitome of, you know, a government not-for-profit partnership. You just do great work. You're thoughtful. It's clear that you take into account so many things. You anticipate so much in what you're doing, right down to the color when you're talking about that. Because I know how much respect your organization has for the lake, and that shows in all that you do. So thank you for taking the time to do this. Any opportunity we have to be able to improve our lake and its surrounding environment is a win for our community, no question. One of the items that I was wondering about as you were speaking, these receptacles, are they becoming more common now? And I ask that only because will people fishing know to look for them, for instance? Like, what is that like now? I don't fish enough to know that answer, but I assume that you would have familiarity.
Yeah, I get the sense that they are becoming more common. Horn Pond is a good example. We've basically taken a lot from them in terms of learning about how to put a program like this in place. And they've only done it in the last 3 years, I think, 2 years or 3 years ago. So it seems like they are becoming
2 years, yeah.
much more common, yeah. When I talk about this to people in general, they'll say, oh yeah, I saw one of those where we were vacationing this summer or things like that. So it seems like it's becoming more of a common thing. And I would say our education and outreach, we want to do that consistently across the years. We don't want to just do it for one season and then hope that everybody gets the message. It would be something we would very regularly be talking about for the foreseeable future.
Just the aesthetic integration into the surrounding lake area, it's so smart. And I think it's such a value add without detracting in any way, certainly. You're adding value to that experience.
Yeah, I'm glad you appreciate it. Yeah, we looked at that and looked at locations, and it just came back to use something that exists, and it's the same width dimension, so not that we want people to miss this, but the education piece is gonna what turns people onto it and generates a lot of use of these, not necessarily spotting something on a pole. So, they'll be available in great places, but they're not going to take away from anything on the lake, which is important.
I do think, too, the QR code is a phenomenal idea. I think it's almost essential because these are so much more than just 4 receptacles. It's also what they represent. So I think that you're going to really be piquing folks' interest, even if they're walking the lake, whatever the case might be. And who doesn't have a cell phone, they can pull out and scan, right? And learn something about it too. So I think that's some of the best outreach and education you can have. That QR code that people are so familiar with now. So I think that's a great addition to the sticker for all reasons.
They can join our organization right on.
Exactly. Well, I did notice that. Yeah, for more information. Yeah,
this was
indeed.
Bree's idea.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Fantastic. I strongly
you.
support it. Thank you for your
Thanks
work.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Carney.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I love it. But I just noticed in my traveling around the lake that the information bulletin board at Bellinger Park needs some work, some loving care. So before they install it, I would hope, Steve, we could have them spruce that bulletin board up.
Very good, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Carney. Councilor Vincent, did you have anything on this?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Maybe I missed this. I'm trying to conduct the meeting from my phone here. We're at the berm and at the lower common, would you actually be placing them? Do you know exactly where at the berm?
Yes, was there a sign in place there?
Yeah, it's just left of if you were to go down to the berm area before you're really at the water, but when it slopes down, there is a structure, a sign there, similar, I think, 4x4,
Okay.
just to the left, yeah. So, close to the shoreline and just off center of the entrance to the berm, on Willard Road.
Yep, and then
Okay,
for
thank
the
you.
lower common, it's near the playground side, there's a sign there, I think
Yeah.
it's a do not feed the waterfowl sign. There's a few of them, but that one that's on the far left.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your work on this.
Thank you.
The only other thing I'll add is I think in a prior meeting, I said that I found one of these lines myself. I was very proud of myself down at Maine and Lowell. And
They're not easy to
I think
spot.
Bree said I shouldn't have thrown it out, but I didn't have a receptacle to put it in. So it'll be good when we have the receptacles. And we also, we always go over one of our policies every month. This is one of Councilor Vincent's very good ideas. And after you leave, or probably after you leave, we're going to be talking about our bench and structure policy. I did want to ask the town administrator, we've had these folks in twice. What do you foresee in terms of maybe getting a vote on this? What more should
right.
we be doing?
So I think pursuant to our lake structure policy, that the request has been made and it's been presented to the town council. and that we will have to, per the policy, enter into a 30-day comment period for the general public. And then this could be brought back for final approval at our April 14th meeting.
So this meeting could serve as the
Yes,
notice of that
absolutely.
30
I
days
think it
starting
does.
to run?
Absolutely does, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because it
Great.
wasn't clear in my own mind.
No, thank you.
Councilor Chines.
So, Mr. Chair, to that end, I'd make a motion to open the public comment period for the proposal with the expectation that we would take this up at the April 14th meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? Seconded?
Yeah,
Councilor Butt.
I'm as one of the people that wrote this this policy. I think Bill, you were on the committee with me. I'm really glad to seeing it being used. So I'm appreciative. Thank you for coming in front of us, and I think 30 days is great. So members of the public, if you want to add any information, weigh in. Reach out. The presentation's on the website as part of our meeting notes, and I look forward to voting on this in 30 days or 2 meetings, whichever comes first.
Okay.
For the
On the motion on the motion before us that has been seconded, any further discussion? Seeing none, I may, Councilor Butler, leave you out of this particular vote instead of a do-over. Councilor Vincent.
Yes.
Councilor Butt.
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Councilor Chines.
Yes.
Councilor Carney.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Jerry, that is 6-0. And thank you all very much for your presentation, your hard work, everything FOLQ does over these many years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Councilor Butler.
Welcome, and this wasn't just because it was, the fishing line. It was that I actually thought I was early. I thought I was in here at 7.
An honest man. I think we can move on to item B, which is the friendly 40B for 84 and 504 Salem Street. Determination to participate in a local initiative program for affordable housing project. And this one is vote anticipated, and we have guests. We have Councilor McGrail.
Good evening.
Good evening. If you gentlemen could just identify yourselves and launch right in there.
Sure, thank you. Good evening. For the record, Attorney Brian McGrail, representing the owners of 484 and 504 Salem Street, and additional land that's appended to those properties, which are part of our proposal. It's Sayal Miguel Realty Trust and DLT Family Limited Partnership. With me tonight is Mike Cavello, who is a representative of both of those entities. Also here tonight in the audience, Peter Sandors and Steve DeFuria from Phoenix Architects, and John Oben from Hayes Engineering. They're not going to be part of our presentation, but I did want them available in case any of the councilors had any questions that might be appropriate for them. I guess to digress, at a prior meeting with the council, we, that being my client and your council, agreed to work together to determine if a friendly 40B development at the properties of 484 and 504 Salem Street would be beneficial to both the town and my clients. And those subject properties actually consist of 4 parcels. They're lots 16, 16D, 16G, and 16FA on the Wakefield Assessors Map 39A. Combined, they contain approximately 415,000 square feet or 9.5 acres of land. As you are aware, you may recall, the development that is being proposed would consist of 24 rental units. They would be made up of 12 one-bedroom units, 9 two-bedroom, and 3 three-bedroom units. Since there are already 5 full market rate rental units on the properties today that would be eliminated as part of this proposal, there would only be a net increase of 19 total units on the combined properties. Because this is a rental unit development with the town would be able to count all 24 of these proposed units towards our subsidized housing inventory, which is often referred to as the HSI, bringing us closer to reaching and maintaining, as time goes on, the 10% goal that is required by the state. The SHI, as you know, is used to monitor the low and moderate income housing stock in the town, and that 10% goal is always something that communities strive for. In addition, not only will we be getting 24 units that will count towards the SHI, but it would help even more because 5 full market rate units will be coming offline. So it would increase that margin even more. If this goes forward, there could also be a local preference with this project, which means that Wakefield residents, which are defined as citizens of Wakefield, family members, town employees, could have a preference for the affordable units through the lottery, which often occurs. During our earlier discussions, it was also agreed by my clients and your council that we would perform more initial planning and due diligence as it relates to the project, and there would be direct involvement by your council in that process. And from doing that, we could again both decide if it was advantageous to move forward. Town council, your council designated Councilor John Carney to be part of the due diligence process on the council's behalf. Councilor Carney has taken the time to meet with our team to get a full understanding of the proposal, and he has participated in the due diligence process fully. I want to thank Councilor Carney for his time in that regard and serving in that capacity. I've submitted documentation to you in advance of this meeting, which really delineates what the due diligence process included and what the results were. We prepared a site civil design of the property and how the building would fit in, which is part of your packet. We've also prepared architectural design drawings so you can get an idea of what the building would look like. The plan shows a 4-story building. The first story is being a parking garage containing 20 parking spaces. There are an additional 22 surface parking spaces with the possibility of even more because of the size of the site. You might take note that the proposed building colors, design, materials look to blend in well within the natural setting and natural landscape. We also prepared a traffic study, and we submitted it to the Wakefield Traffic Advisory Committee. We appeared before the Traffic Advisory Committee to present it. It's important to note that members both of the fire department and the police department participated in that Traffic Advisory Committee process. The access to the property, you might recall, goes through the existing Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, which is owned by a related party, and would provide access easements necessary for this project to go through. And it is fortunately controlled by a traffic light onto Salem Street, which really has great control over the entire site. The Traffic Advisory Committee, after review, concluded that the project is not expected to have a significant impact on traffic operations and determined that it was an appropriate site for a 40B development of this sort. We also spent the time to have the wetlands delineated with the Conservation Commission. We did a filing with them so we could confirm the location of the wetlands on the property, so there wouldn't be any surprises in that regard. And that was a pretty easy process. They were very helpful in that regard. I do want to point out that the Conservation Commission has not reviewed the project because they can't until it is filed. So the project will still have to go before them with a notice of intent filing if it goes forward. And they will look at the project in detail itself and certainly have, I'm sure, comments and requests if that takes place. We also had meetings with the Department of Public Works Engineering Division to review the utilities and drainage that would serve and be impacted by this project. And they concluded that there are no issues with utilities or drainage anticipated. We also had a meeting with Senior Planner Samantha Elliott and Town Administrator Mayo to go over the Friendly 40B process, how it works with the state, and to be on the same page with them. So from my client's perspective, after completing our due diligence, they have decided that they would like to move forward. And thus, on their behalf, I'm respectfully requesting that your council vote to support and participate in the Friendly 40B comprehensive permit development of the subject properties. If you decide to do so, the next step would be a joint submittal of a local initiative program application for comprehensive permit project with the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. That application has to be signed by us and has to be signed by duly authorized representative of your board. It also requires a letter of support from your council for the project. This would hopefully result in the EOHLC issuing what they call a site eligibility letter for the project at the property. And this is a prerequisite, if that occurs, to us then being able to file for the comprehensive permit with the Zoning Board of Appeals. Until that eligibility letter is issued, there's no opportunity to apply. We will work with the town senior planner on the application to the EOHLC. And also, my client would, at their expense, provide for an expert consultant to help us and the town work through that process. It's a pretty detailed application process. So they would pay for that consultant to work with them and the senior town planner in getting that completed properly. If you do agree to participate, and we're fortunate enough to get a site approval or a site eligibility letter for the project, I do want to stress this project still needs to go through a full application process and public hearing process at the Zoning Board of Appeals. And, as I've mentioned, a filing of a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission. And I think, as you're well aware, both of those boards do a very thorough job on the review process, so I'm sure they would have input on the project as well if it proceeds. With that said, we're happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Councilor Carney.
If you recall, Mr. Chairman, I asked to participate in this project because
Correct.
I know that property from my youth. And I remember when the old Hudson bus line was there and it contaminated a lot in total disrepair next to the Montrose Ice Cream, which is a place we all went when we were young. I knew the family that grew up in one of those houses. In fact, one of the my classmates still lives in Wakefield on Farm Street. So I was interested in getting involved and seeing it. I see this as only an improvement, and I respect the process that was recommended by council and by the his client, and I would support it 100%.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Dombrowski.
Thank you, Mr. McGrail, and to your client for this presentation. It's nice to have a friendly 40B because I feel like we have a lot of unfriendly 40Bs that we've been dealing with within our community. So I appreciate your client's efforts to try to work with the town on this project. What I think is interesting about this location is a lot of folks don't realize that there's housing there currently. And even if you're driving to the Dunkin' parking lot, you may not realize there's a house unless you're looking for it. I know there's 2 properties. Do you have a sense of what the height is currently of the 2-family or the 3-family that are currently on site, at least in relation to what this new structure would
Sure.
be?
John, do you think you might be able to give an estimate of that? How about our building? Peter?
I think we have it.
Approximately.
Can't read it. Looks like we're at 47.
We're at about 47 feet.
I think those houses they're at least 2-story, but I
Oh,
feel like I feel like they're taller 2-story. They're not like
they're up there.
because
Yeah.
they're older, so
Yeah.
I feel like they feel taller than a standard 2-story.
The way we've designed this, it's set back kind of into the woods. We're not anticipating that it will have any visual impact. Certainly not from a neighborhood, but we don't even think you're going to be able to see it from the street.
Yeah, Brian, to clarify, so the tallest point, we're strategically trying to step the building. At its tallest point, it's 44 feet from grade.
And the other piece, which I think is just really important in keeping this friendly, is understanding that natural buffer that you talk about now that exists. The reason why people don't notice the housing that's there now, I think is really important to maintain. There are mature trees there, so when you're, again, if you're at the Dunkin' Donuts or in that parking lot looking, there's a nice natural screening, if you will, and I think that's really important. And from what I can tell of this design, it presents as if you've recognize that and set this building back in such a way so that it does. It's not right there, you know, in your face in Salem, but I think that would be an important aspect to it too, because that's one of the few areas where we still have a lot of mature trees and some nice space, that wooded space, and I'd hate to see that go. So to the extent you're able to maintain that, I think it's really important.
That's the goal. And the other part of it, that, you know, when you take the whole 9.5 acres of land, this is not utilizing a lot of it, but it's incorporating all of that land into this project. So in essence, it's going to reserve that land in its current state in perpetuity. So it will never be subdivided, a road won't be put in, further development won't happen.
I just think that it's really important because it's one of the few areas around town where there are still trees. There is still, you know, kind of forested area, if you will. And so being able to maintain that would be a real nice improvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have anything, Councilor Vincent? Yes, you have a hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair McLean, and thanks, Mr. McGrath, for, I agree with what Councilman Nabrowski says. It's nice to have a friendly 40B. I just had two things I wanted to note. In the site plan, I noticed that at a recent Traffic Advisory Committee meeting, there was a question about the fire department being able to respond to calls at the property. And one of the suggestions from the fire department was to add a sign that would clearly direct emergency vehicles to the proposed building. So when you come in off Salem Street and you're heading towards the Dunkin' Donuts, there'd be a sign telling the fire department to go left. Is that what you're envisioning?
I'm just looking at the note to respond. So I'll just read the comment because it might be helpful for context. It says, a question was raised at the TAC meeting regarding public safety and emergency vehicle response, given the location of the site access being located off of the Dunkin' Donuts circulation driveway. The Wakefield Fire Department noted that they have responded to calls at this property in the past, but noted that it would be beneficial to add signage to clearly direct emergency vehicles to the proposed building.
Oh, it's at the end of VHB.
There's a VHB letter I think he's referring to.
VHB letter, correct. Yeah, that's a Traffic Advisory Committee report. So they did request what you're saying. So I just wanted to read it for context, and they did request it, and absolutely that's something that we would work with the Zoning Board of Appeals to find an appropriate location. And, you know, I also want to stress, you know, the fire department and police department are going to have a detailed look at this when it goes to the zoning board. So I'm sure they might have other comments that we need to address. But that's a good point, and it's something that we certainly will address when we get before the Zoning Board of Appeals, if we're fortunate enough to get there.
Yeah, thank you. And then the other thing I thought that was noteworthy was the overflow parking, to actually be able to use that Dunkin' Donuts site because of the common ownership. That overflow parking would be, that first area of parking when you first make that turn off of Salem, is that what that overflow parking would be for the residents of the new unit?
If it was needed, yeah, at night, you know, there's plenty of room for overflow parking in the Dunkin' Donuts overnight, but I think, you know, what we're showing now are 42 parking spaces, only 38 are required under current zoning. And with a lot of 40Bs, you know, the not friendly ones that come, you might take note that they always have not enough parking under our zoning. They're always saying that they don't need it and making the arguments. We actually have excess parking compared to our zoning. But the Traffic Advisory Committee took note and said, provide more if you can, which I think we might be able to do on our own site a little bit. But if we had to, for visitors overnight, you know, they could flow over into the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot if they had to.
Well, as always, I appreciate your attention to detail, and I certainly support this project. Thank you.
Questions from any other councilors? I just had two quick ones.
You can go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
There
you
you
go
go.
ahead. You go ahead. You were.
No.
I just.
I always like to wait till last.
It's okay. I think, yeah, looking at it, the 42 parking spaces is fantastic. That's like, you know, that's great. It is going to extend as far down as that sort of pond area there. Like, how visible is this going to be from sort of Walton Street, and more concerned about Walton Street and Jessica Lane
Well, I don't think it's good. There's a lot of,
I think there's a lot of
there's a
woods
lot of
there.
wood in there, yeah.
Yeah, so that, you're not, I just can't gauge from Google
No.
Maps and from trying
No.
to juxtapose your thing. And then,
And
I've been there, it does seem very marshy there.
It
And
is.
I'm not like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm very pro this development seems like an ideal place, although like it feels like it'd be tough dealing with the donuts parking lot and, if I lived there. But I'd also be close to the donut store, so that would be.
They can walk for their coffee. Yeah.
All set, Counselor?
Yeah.
Counselor Carney?
I just want to make one more comment. You know, you're probably going to advertise that you can leave your apartment and go over and get a Dunkin' Donuts coffee in the morning, and then in the afternoon you can go to the new liquor license with walking distance.
Or in the morning, actually.
That's a dream residence.
Everything.
8 a.m.
8 a.m. other than Sundays.
Only beer and wine, though, not full liquor.
Irish coffee. Counselor, just one quick question on the rendition, the first floor of this, what, is that residential, or, I may have missed it, it's not parking under? It is parking under?
No, the first floor is parking.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
so-
how
so
many
it-
of your parking spaces does that accommodate?
20,
20, so then you only have
22 surface.
22 surface.
Correct.
So not as much asphalt,
No.
still a lot of open land. How close are you to your nearest non-related party neighbor? Do you have any idea? I mean, are we talking like, you know, I don't know the neighborhood all that well, I know their house is in there behind the property, but any idea how close
John?
they are?
How close are we to any, like, neighboring house or?
Probably the closest would be off of Walton Street. And we're, from the property line, I don't have the actual houses plotted on here, but it's more than, say, 30 feet from the property line.
And will there be a tree buffer between your?
There's a buffer because there's actually some wetlands along that property line, so obviously that would not be disturbed.
So there's
vegetation
existing tree line or trees between your building rendition and that property?
Yeah. It would remain.
Yes, that won't be touched. Yeah, it's going to be protected as wetlands anyways.
Yeah, I was just curious about the
Yeah.
distance,
Yeah.
roughly. I'm not trying to get
Yeah.
you down to like actual measurements. I'm just curious about, what we might hear from neighbors. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, just looking at the map now, it looks like it's about 150 to 200 feet. It's pretty far.
Okay, good. All right, I think everybody was, counselor supportive of this project. I think we still are. And would entertain a motion that, that we determine to participate in the local initiative program or support the participation in the local initiative program. Counselor Carney, would you like to make the motion?
if you like.
Yes, sir.
I make a motion that the town council vote to do the following. 1, to support and participate in the local initiative program for comprehensive permanent development at the properties referred to as 484 and 504 Salem Street, being lots 16, 16D, 16G, and 16F on the Wakefield's Assessors Map 39A, and in doing so, we hereby direct the Wakefield Senior Town Planner to work with the development team to move the development forward, including but not limited to the preparation and submission of local initiative program application for comprehensive permit project to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, and 2, to authorize the town administrator or town council chair to sign the local initiative program application for comprehensive permit project and to request letter of support.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any further discussion?
Just
from
a
the
point of
town
order.
council?
If I
Sorry.
may. It's, Councilor Carney referenced 16F, it's 16FA, just for record.
Okay. Sherry, you got that? 16FA? She does. Of course she does.
I got it.
Any other discussion on the motion seconded, Councilor Butler?
Just what is the benefit to us of working this as a friendly 40B versus versus not. I mean, like, I just, we're approving something saying, yes, we'll do this in reconciliation with that help, but like, is there, you know, this proposal seems perfectly fine, but I'm just not sure why we want to advance it as a friendly 40B versus just a regular 40B, or is there?
You want to start with that one, Council?
I can,
Yeah.
yeah. I think from other projects that you've seen recently in Wakefield, if this wasn't a friendly 40B, you'd probably be seeing 75 units here.
Okay, that's
You
the
know, and
answer.
that's- Yeah, you know, that's probably what would happen. It would just be a bigger project, less parking. My client's intent is to continue be cooperative, even with the zoning board of appeals. We want to work things out. We don't want to force anything upon the town, and that's why we're here. But I think it would be a bigger project, probably.
Okay.
I think generally we get a better project, we get a smaller project. We continue to try to meet that 10% the way we would rather prefer to meet it, as opposed to the way it is sometimes forced upon us.
Okay, I just wanted to get that
Yeah.
on, like, you know, so people understand what the alternatives would potentially be.
Right. Yeah, the alternative could be
Yeah.
Hunt Street. Or something else like it. Any other discussion on the motion or questions from councilors? Don't see any. That being said, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilor Vincent.
Yes.
Councilor Butler.
Yes.
Councilor Butt.
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Councilor Shines.
Yes.
Councilor Carney.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Sherry, that's 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks for your perseverance.
Thank
In
you.
the project, yeah.
Thank you.
Item C is a housing production plan update. And I see our senior planner, and I see we have guests. Who's taking this one on? Samantha? Who's starting here? We also have Councilor Vincent.
I'm happy to give a brief overview.
Okay.
And then turn it over to our consultant. So good evening, everyone. We have been working diligently on the housing production plan and getting all of that together for a May end date. We've been working with the consultant. We've so far done a survey. We've had a hybrid meeting with the advisory committee, and we're able to start working on getting some basic goals put together. And I've been very appreciative of how collaborative and engaged the consultant has been in helping us figure out, at least starting to get the basics together of what Wakefield needs under the housing needs assessment. And then now looking forward to seeing where we'll be setting goals to go in the next 5 to 10 years. So just giving a brief overview of our consultant, Jen Goldson of JM Goldson is here. We've been working with her as well as her colleague, Noah Harper, on the housing production plan itself. And like I said, they've been getting everything together. So I'll turn it over to her to go over the status of it and kind of give you some basics on the housing production plan as it stands now.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Samantha. Thank you for having me here. I do have a presentation, and I'll try to be quick. I know your agenda is full, but I hope that that's okay. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I'll go ahead and share that. And for the benefit of being accessible, we do have our closed captions on, so hopefully that's helpful to folks. But I just want everyone to know that sometimes the automatic closed captions in Zoom doesn't understand some of the words that I say. So if you ever see something weird and you know that's not what I said, that's what's happening. So I'm Jen Goldson, planning consultant. Samantha, thank you so much for the introduction. My colleague Noah Harper and I are really excited to be sort of more than halfway on this project. We started working several months ago. We really started with a housing needs assessment, which is collecting a whole bunch of data, and I'm going to just go through a little bit of those findings, but I encourage you to read the report more thoroughly and let us know if you have questions. But the next piece of it, as Samantha said, is really focusing in on, well, what do you do? Given where you are right now, and I heard you talking about a LIP, approving going on with a LIP 40B just a little while ago. So what's the future for Wakefield? What are you going to do? What kind of goals do you want to have? You're almost at the 10%, so that will actually adjust potentially what you're doing. And Samantha, if I say anything wrong, I want you to just jump right in and correct me immediately. You don't need to be polite. The other thing, that you can have when you're in the position that you are. So I'm going to go ahead.
Sorry, Ms. Galton, we lost you for
Yeah,
a second.
we lost you for a second there. Could you maybe back up a minute?
Oh, of course. I was just saying that when you're in a position that you're very close to reaching the state's mandated 10% goal, I should say, you're in a position to decide, what do you want to promote? What kind of housing do you want to promote? And it's not just about affordable housing. The housing production plan also looks at what kind of market rate housing, what kind of housing styles, what kind of households are giving you the most demand. And so we can certainly talk about that a little bit tonight. And then what I'd like to say before I start, and I'm going to say it again at the end, there's a forum coming up. We're doing an in-person forum and a virtual forum. And I really hope you can all be there and help get people out. This is when we're really helping to figure out what does Wakefield do in the next 5 years. What kind of zoning policies, local initiative like you just did before, what kind of programs or other initiatives do you want to promote? And that's all going to be talked about on April 9th. That will be in person. And then on April 16th, that will be virtual. So we wanted to run both in person and virtual, give folks the chance, but it's going to be the same material. So I'd like to promote that. And then what I'd like to just say quickly is that we are planning to finish up in the next few months. So the forum next month, the 2 sets of forums next month, is really the getting those policies right, getting public input on the policies, getting your input on the policies, and then our plan is to finalize the plan this spring. So happy to talk more about the schedule, but I'm just going to try to move through this in respect to your agenda. All right, so some of this, I think you got this in your packet, so I'm going to go over this very quickly. But the draft report has a lot more detail than I'm going to cover tonight. So there has been some growth in Wakefield. It is expected to slow. But more interesting than the projected growth is the share of who you're going to be having in your community. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Your share of renters has also grown, which is great. There was a really interesting and informative study several years ago by the Joint Center for Housing Studies. And what they kind of set as a benchmark is that communities like yours should have at least 20% of your housing as rental stock. That's kind of the floor. And so you did exceed that, which is great because it provides more rental opportunities for folks. You're still primarily ownership. That's both condominiums and home ownership as well. And the other interesting thing that we see a lot in communities that we work with is that the size of your households have gone down. And the most recent data that we collected from the census shows that about 60% of all the households that live in Wakefield actually just have 1 or 2 people living in them. So I don't know if that surprises you. It often surprises the communities that we work with. They think of their community maybe as having, more larger family households with 3 people or 4 people. But really what we're seeing is a lot of smaller homes, and it makes a lot of sense as communities have demographics that are aging, and maybe they had kids and they grew up and left home. That's the situation I'm in now as an empty nester. But there are all sorts of household formations, people living alone, people living with one other person, and that's primarily what you're seeing. And the reason I look at that is because there's often a housing mismatch, and that's what we find in Wakefield as well, that you have more larger units. This is actually showing that you've added more multifamily housing in recent years, which is also great because what we see when communities have a heavier amount of just single family, they just really provide less option for people. There might be, seniors, for example, who are overhoused, living in units that they really want to stay in the community, but they don't have a lot of options. So seeing that you've built multifamily is really terrific. So we also look at the cost of housing. So we look at rental and we look at home ownership, and we look at that compared to wages as well. That's pretty interesting for folks to look at. The cost of housing has, grown exponentially, especially when you look at the wage for average workers. And I'm not going to get into the numbers here, but we see this issue for both rental and for ownership, that as incomes don't rise as much as housing costs, it just puts much more of a burden on folks. And I'll talk about that concept of burden in a moment. But just so you can see some of these prices here, you may know this already. And we always look at data that's slightly behind because we want to look at a full year. So this is from 2024, and the median single family sales price was $805,000. So that's gone up quite a lot. We looked at your prior housing production plans as well, and I think you probably all feel that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. And although we thought this was pretty interesting, although residential property tax rates have decreased, the values of those properties have certainly gone up, so that the tax burdens ultimately are higher than what you saw in the past for homeowners and property owners. And then we also look at vacancy rate. And what we find in Wakefield, you do have, now quite a bit of rental housing stock, so we're not seeing as much pressure there. You want to have a nice little healthy margin of vacancy. Vacancy is a good thing to a certain extent. And for rental, what economists recommend, and that, this benchmark changes, and it changes depending on what economist you're looking at, but what we typically use is at least 6 6%, 6 to 10% is a pretty healthy vacancy rate for rental housing in a community. And then, it depends on which economist you look at, but about 5 to 8% is what you want for home ownership. And so you can see that this vacancy for home ownership is really too low, no matter which economist you look at. So the focus here, in our opinion, is, certainly rental housing. You're probably going to keep building rental housing, but really looking at how can we encourage more affordable ownership homes, and more ownership homes of all different kinds, including smaller units, including condominium units and different housing types, because we're seeing this very low ownership vacancy rate. So the other thing that we looked at here is just the supply of housing on the market. So this is also indicating, need for more ownership homes. We have a real tight supply on the market in October 2024, which is the most recent data we had when we started working on these numbers. There was an estimated 1.2 months of supply for single-family homes, and economists look at 5 to 6 months supply, healthy market. So some things to consider. I don't want to bog you down in too much of the data, but just a few more points here. This is a bit of a complicated graph. You might not be able to read this whole thing. I'm not sure how big the screen is, but the biggest takeaway is this upper line here, this dark brown line, shows what a household would need to earn annually to afford the median Wakefield home today. That's a single family home. So a household would need to have a household income of about just over $270,000 in order to afford that median single family sales price. And then for a condo, you'd need to have an income of about almost $195,000 to afford the median condo. And you can see when we look at all these different income levels in Wakefield and in the region as well, you're just not there. So the median town household income is only $125,592. So well below what you would need to even just afford a condo, and even further below what you need to afford a single family home. So we just look at that as that gap, how much of a difference that is, and it's a very big difference. And I'm sure you all know this intuitively if you didn't know the numbers, but you probably feel it living in the community. This one goes into some more details about households that earn even lower incomes than the median and even lower than the max for affordable housing. This is looking at 50% of the area median income. And if anybody's interested, I do have these income figures and what that means, but at the different 30%, 50%, and 80% area median income. But this chart is just showing, if you're making that 50% of the area median income, which is considered very low income, you really couldn't afford units on the market that are for rent in Wakefield. You really need to be earning above that. And why do we care? We care because there are lots of folks that earn under those incomes. So if you're a single person living alone and you earn $57,000 or less, it's actually $57,100 or less, then you would be considered a household with 50% of the area median income. If you have a family and you live four-person family, $81,600 would be that income cap. So happy to go into that in more detail. This is about cost burden. So if folks are familiar with that, it's just a measure that we use. We like to see households spend less than 30% of their total gross income on housing costs. That includes rent and utilities for rental, and it includes mortgage, insurance, taxes for home ownership. And what we're seeing in Wakefield is that almost 3,000 households are spending too much. They're cost burdened, whether they're rental or ownership. And the other thing we like to look at is how many affordable units are actually in the town. And we say affordable units here opposed to subsidized housing inventory units. And if I could see you better, I'd ask you, do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know the difference? But because I can't see you that well, and I appreciate you letting me come in virtually, I'll just explain that the subsidized housing inventory is just a list of all the units the state counts as affordable to help meet your goal of that 10%. And that's 1,028 units right now in Wakefield. But not all of those are actually affordable to low-income households, low and moderate-income households. Quite a bit of those are actually just market rate because they're rental units, and if you build a rental unit under Chapter 40B, under comprehensive permit, you can count the market rate units toward that SHI, as people call it, or subsidized housing inventory. So the reason we're saying you only have 456 actually affordable units is because these are the deed-restricted affordable units that are subsidized and available for folks that make that lower income. So it's only 456, which is a really big gap. If you look at all of the households in Wakefield that could potentially qualify for affordable housing, that number is 2,460 units. Misspeaking. 2,460 households that live in Wakefield that could potentially qualify. And that's why your cost-burdened households are so high, because you have so many of these households that are lower moderate income that could potentially qualify for affordable units, yet there are, only 456 affordable units. So that's the other gap we look at, and you can see how big that gap is. So we look a little bit less at how many are on the subsidized housing inventory, and we look a little bit more at how many of those are actually affordable and how many of the households living in Wakefield today could potentially qualify and can't get that housing. So therefore, they're spending too much on housing costs. So hopefully this makes sense. There are also, like I said earlier in my preamble, the housing production plan looks at more than just affordable housing. And because you're so close to reaching that 10%, we really want to look at, well, what other housing needs are there? And there's a big gap in Wakefield, even for middle-income households. So those households wouldn't qualify for affordable housing, traditional affordable housing, but they would qualify for other programs, workforce housing or housing built under what's called community housing under the Community Preservation Act. And so this middle middle to high household earnings range 80 to 120%, you also have a great need for that level of household affordability. All right. And then we also did a projection for you. We don't always do this for housing production plans, but I think the town is particularly interested in, if you crunch the numbers and you look at the projections, population projections in the different age categories from UMass Donahue, which many of you may be familiar with. It's basically a state agency out of UMass that does housing production. They do demographic projections for every community in Massachusetts. If you look at that, you need just under 1,000 net new housing units to just meet the demand that's expected in Wakefield by 2040. So we looked at 15 years out, and there are all sorts of assumptions that go into this. If you change one assumption, everything will change. We're not going to walk through the details of that tonight, but it is laid out in the report, and I'm very happy to take questions. If you want to email us questions about the methodology, we're very happy to talk through that. But it's just giving you a general bar of how many units just to keep pace with the growth that's expected, the regional growth and the pressures on the community, and then what ages. And you can see, the one thing I want you to take away from this bar chart is the dark blue is the projected age of householders in 2040, and this bar, the big one, is 65 years and older. So you do have a big and growing population of older adults in Wakefield. And then you can see that some of them are even going down, like 55 to 64 age group will go down in that 15-year period. So will, people 15 to 24 will go down a little bit, but really the biggest difference we're seeing is that growth in the 65 and older. So that even tells us even more, this is why we're seeing smaller household sizes. This is part of the great demand for housing units. All right. And then just highlighting that point I made earlier when I talked about the household sizes have been, decreasing to more. You have about 60% of households that are one person living alone or two people living together. And that tells us as housing folks that, well, with that shift in demographics, and especially with the population getting older, we really want to see more smaller units being developed. And this is sort of when we do that projection of how will those age groups change by 2040, we see that you need these smaller studio and one bedrooms, about 55% of the units, and then about 20% two bedrooms. So happy to, take questions on that, but that's what we're seeing in terms of your housing needs. And this is just telling you more about that senior population, which I already talked to you about. This is breaking it down by the senior housing needs. And you can see we broke it down by ownership and rental, both now and then in the 15-year projection. All right, so in summary, and I've tried to seed most of these comments throughout the presentation, and I've also tried to go fast to respect your time. Hopefully I didn't go too fast, but we see those decreasing housing sizes, household sizes. We see that growth of the multifamily and rental, which is great to provide more housing opportunity. We see that home ownership opportunities in particular is something you may want to focus on, is creating more affordable home ownership opportunities. We see that deficit of, almost 2,000 for those income restricted units. We see that projected household growth. I already talked about the attainable home ownership for middle income as well. And then that senior household growth. So more accessible as well as affordable housing to accommodate that growth. Okay, that was a whirlwind, I'm sure. What we're doing next is we are meeting with the committee again, 3/18, which I believe is next week. And we'll be looking at those draft goals and strategies, and then we'll have those two community forums. As I said, April 9th at 5 p.m. Senior Center and April 16th at noon virtual. And I really hope you can all be there and help get your constituents out as well. This is a great opportunity to talk about the future of Wakefield in terms of housing, in terms of zoning, in terms of meeting the needs of a shifting population, especially older residents. And I believe that is the end of the presentation. So I'll go ahead and take that down, but happy to take questions as you have time to do that.
Questions, Councilor Carney?
I'm kind of, I was looking to try, I could do the math myself, but the amount of housing units over the last 15 to 20 years compared to the population, you know, I recall in my youth, we had 5 and 6 member families living in 2 and 3 bedroom homes. They had no dining rooms and the small capes, and it seems to me that we've had an explosion of the size of houses in Wakefield, and I think now you have more smaller families live in larger homes, and often that helps in getting a home office or what have you. They use a spare bedroom for a home office. So I was kind of shocked at the fact that, you know, the comparison in the cost of trying to live in Wakefield, but people are doing it. We have such a such a low level of availability on homes where people are coming in here and they're buying homes. So the market is strong in that area. And then when you talk about affordable units, one question when I was thinking through it, you're not talking about how people pay their rent or mortgage. So Section 8 would not be included in this, because Section 8 they wouldn't be considered low-income housing at that point, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's a great question. So to address the first point about, you know, building big homes and people are definitely still moving in, yeah, and what we're seeing in communities that have, you know, basically not enough opportunity to downsize, we see that seniors are, you know, maybe really wanting to stay in the community, but they're taking on higher maintenance costs, higher energy costs to heat those larger homes, and just the, you know, the overall maintenance, snow shoveling, all those things that come with those, you know, larger homes and that lack of downsizing. So that is, you know, a component of it. In terms of the affordable, yeah, if you have a rental voucher, which a lot of people say Section 8, that's basically a rental voucher that folks can go and rent a market rate apartment. Sometimes you also call Section 8, they could be project-based Section 8 or place-based Section 8. It's a funding mechanism to create affordable housing. Those households, by the very nature of the program, will not be cost burdened because they can't spend more than 30% of income on those housing costs. What I'm talking about is folks that don't have the benefit of that program. There's a state program and a federal program that provides that benefit. But those cost burdened households, you know, are probably paying market rate because they really want to live in Wakefield, you know, to be part of the community, and they are just paying more than that 30%. So that just puts them a little bit more vulnerable, depending on how much more they're paying, more than that 30% of their income. Means they, you know, if a medical bill comes up or a car expense comes up, they may, you know, be at risk of housing instability, have trouble paying their mortgage or their rent with issues. So I hope that makes sense in terms of that Section 8 and the cost burden. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Chines.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the overview. It's an incredible treasure trove of data, and really presents some sort of eye-opening conclusions, particularly around kind of the gap between housing size and average household size, the gap between the number of affordable units that we have and the number of households that require them. And probably the most striking fact, the average income needed to afford the medium home in Wakefield is definitely an eye-popping statistic. I want to ask a couple of questions around the affordable housing piece. As you look at the ratio between Wakefield subsidized housing inventory and the number of actual homes, as well as that gap of 2,000 units, do you have a sense as to how those figures compare either to other communities in the area or to the region as a whole? Are we an outlier in those? Is that something that is fairly representative of what you see in other communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, the communities, we work all over Massachusetts and then in other parts of New England as well. And we see those large gaps very, very regularly. It's not, you're definitely not an outlier. We do see a lot of cost-burdened households and just not enough affordable homes, and so that's a big problem regionally, you know, in the larger New England region as well as the whole state of Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's on the one hand, I'm encouraged the fact that some of the things we've done so far are the right moves. When I think about, inclusionary zoning is a great example of what we've done. Obviously, striving to increase the SHI is important, but again, that gap between what counts for the SHI and what's actually affordable, it remains something that is concerning, and certainly I hope as we get into recommendations that we'll be hearing more about that and discussing more about that in the forums that are coming up. But again, thank you. Appreciate the work that's gone into this.
Thank you.
Councilor Butler. Oh, Councilor Vincent, you have a hand up.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Jen, thank you for the presentation, and I want to tell you how impressed I've been with Noah Harper from your firm. And Steve, again, I have to commend Sam Elliott for her work on the housing production plan as well. Her work is, as always, exemplary. As the chair of the Housing Production Plan Advisory Committee, I thought it was important for the council to hear from the consultant tonight. We've had a lot of discussions about consultants over the last few weeks. I think one thing that is beneficial is when we actually have the consultant come in and give us a briefing and we can do a Q&A with them. I've been incredibly impressed with J.M. Goldson, the work that they did on the housing needs assessment and the survey. And I thought it was important that both the production plan survey and the housing needs assessment gets put in the package besides their overview so that the council could look at all the documentation. Also note that there were 532 people that responded to the survey over 8 weeks. That's not the number that we achieved with the MBTA 40A, but of course that was a hot button issue. But that certainly is a pretty impressive number when we've looked at the numbers of consultants for some of the other things that have come before us in the last few months. And the other thing I want to remind the council was my last day is April 22nd. And as you saw from the timeline, this plan is not going to be presented until sometime in the summer. So Councilor Butler and I are on the Housing Production Plan Advisory Committee as the town council representatives. So probably at that April 14th meeting, the council is going to have to decide who they're going to have take my place. I mean, I'll continue to go to the forum on the 16th, but we are going to need to put somebody in place rather quickly who can jump right into the process and help carry it to the finish line, whether that's May or June. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions from councilors? Councilor Butler?
Yeah, I do think before we get too far down the garden path with the idea that we're sort of shy, that we would want 2,000 more, affordable housing units. Let's not be crazy here. We have, 11,000 total units in the town, and we're saying that we're 2,000 units shy. And similar to Councilor Chines, a lot of the degree is the notion of measuring it as a percentage of income versus what is affordable. So there are a whole lot of sort of lower income seniors who are living in houses that they own currently, that they are probably not spending 30% of their income on housing because they either don't have mortgages and they're just paying taxes, or they have very low mortgages. So I think I don't want us to get fixated on the notion that we are severely under affordable housed here. Like in terms of, I don't think we need 5 times the number of affordable housing units that we than we currently have. I do agree, and it is it's commendable, and I think J.M. Goldson's done a really good job. I think the notion of, yes, that we have 1,200 or whatever the number was on our SHI, but it's really 550. It's not dissimilar from the MBTA Communities Act that's going to really result in 5 new apartments or something like that. But I do think this is they're helping us put together a plan that, at least could address some of the issues, in particular the notion that we're aging. I'm always leery of projections that go, 20 years out and say that we're going to have, I'm not sure we're going to have that dramatic a spike in seniors in our town. I understand that's what the the consultants brought in said, but that also makes some assumptions about, like, I don't know if, you know, I'm going to be in that 65 and over demographic. I'm not sure I'm sitting through a winter here in Wakefield when I'm 70, but we'll see. But overall, I think Noah's done a great job. I think we've been very impressed with the output. I know Sam has done a really good job on this. I just don't want us to paint the picture that, like, it's, you know, it's dire and urgent, and it's not as dire. It's an urgent need that needs to be met, but it isn't. We're not far off most of our other communities, and the affordability issue probably has gotten even worse. Again, as interest rates have gone up since 2022. But I think we also have to think about, like, what is realistic. You know, I don't think we'd want. It would change the complexion of our town too greatly, and people would come at us with pitchforks and torches if we proposed adding 2,000 affordable units.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question just following up on Councilor Butler's comment? And I don't know, Jen, if this is something you have the answer to.
Sure.
When we look at households that are cost burdened, is that based on the value of the housing or what they're reported to spend? Because I think that question gets to, I think, some of what you're trying to parse out, Councilor Butler.
I think they're getting it from two different sources.
Yeah, so that's, I guess, I would like to just maybe dig into that a little bit just to understand exactly what the data are showing, because I think, you know, that does impact how we view those that 2,000 unit gap one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you're thinking this through. So when you look at a gap, so I'm going to answer your question second. I'm going to respond first. I'm sorry, I can't remember all the counselors' name, but to the first counselor who spoke. So when you look at that gap of how many households are already living in Wakefield and reporting their income as a, you know, certain percentage, or reporting their housing costs rather as a certain percentage, it's based on something called the American Community Survey, which is a sample of the community. It's not a 100% count, and it's an estimate of how many people are spending more than that 30%, but it is self-reported based on a sample. But when you look at that and you look at the difference between that, what was it, 460 units that are actually affordable versus the 2,460 that are cost burdened, there's two sides of that equation. So the solution isn't necessarily, well, we need 2,000 more units of affordable. Part of the solution is, can we help so that with our policies, with what, you know, what we allow to be built, with what we support through zoning, can we help those other 2,000 households that are reporting cost burden to live in a different situation in our town? It could be a market rate situation. Perhaps they are, you know, some of those overhoused seniors that are, you know, paying property taxes and whatnot on a larger home that maybe they did raise their kids in, and now they don't, you know, they really don't need that large of a home or even want that large of a home. Do they have enough options that are market rate? I'm not talking about affordable housing. I'm talking about lower priced housing because of the size of the housing. So it could be a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom is going to be, you know, mostly cheaper than a 5-bedroom single family. So that's something to consider. It's not necessarily about building affordable housing, although I think that's part of the equation. And I'm glad you have the inclusionary zoning, because that's a really good step in the right direction. But it's also about, can we just provide through our policies the ability for the market to respond to a need that is there, to have housing types that are just cheaper. Or less expensive, if you don't like that word cheaper. The other thing I want to report as a, I guess it's just a part of the equation that's not in the data that we have access to, but those 2,000 households, we don't know what their assets are. We don't have any way of knowing what their assets are. So they could have, you know, a huge pension and a multi-million-dollar home. They may have a lot of assets. They may have, you know, done great on the stock market. They may have an inheritance. They may have a trust fund. We don't know that. All we know is the income that they're reporting as being, over that 30% of their housing costs. So there's there's definitely some nuances to that data that I certainly don't want anyone to walk away thinking that we said you need 2,000 more affordable units. That's certainly not what we meant for you to take away from that. But we do want to show you that the number of affordable units you have per the subsidized housing inventory is a lot less than one might think when you look at the 1,000 so units you have listed. That was really the main point. Does that answer all the questions and comments that were just brought up?
Yeah, that was incredibly helpful, yes.
Okay. Any, Councilor Dombrowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for providing this information. Really appreciate the analysis as you've done it. I do take issue with the idea, or the terminology overhoused. I understand where you're coming from a purely analytical standpoint, that you're saying that there are people that are in larger housing than they need to be potentially, and it sounds like it's targeting seniors in particular. I think it's really important that we have a sensitivity here to that, and that sensitivity is that there are a lot of people who want to age in place in their own home. And while there certainly are seniors who want to be able to downsize for any number of reasons, there's also a good segment of the senior population that wants to be able to just live in their house and afford to do so. And I think part of the analysis that you touch on, I think it's slide 10, but there's not a lot of it, it's not really expounded upon, is the ways in which we as a town council can make it more affordable for seniors, and for anyone else for that matter, who's having difficulty with meeting their burdens. And I think, rather than focus on overhoused, I think we need to focus on overtaxed. And I think that this council in recent years has adopted certain policies I've not supported, but that have created a higher tax burden for folks. We know that and I understand the tax rate and where it's been steady, but we also have some other ways that that a majority of this council has voted to support greater tax increases than are required. I understand that property values have gone up. I understand that assessed values have gone up. And so even with the tax rate as it is, that creates this greater delta, if you will. But this council's current policy in terms of taxing has done those folks no favor, certainly. I also think that it's interesting that you point out that assumptions matter here, and I agree wholeheartedly. And as you said, just one assumption that is off or tweaked or changes can really have a pretty significant a cascading effect over the analysis, right? I think that's a fair way of summing it up. And I think back to where we were as a community probably 20 years ago, say, or maybe even say 24 years ago, back in the year 2000. I don't think that projections back in 2000 would have would have landed accurately with where the reality is that we find ourselves now in 2025. Some quarter century later. So while I respect the fact that projections are a tool to use, I think that there are so many variables that could lead to those assumptions being really thrown out of whack. Many variables beyond our control entirely. And so I hazard to put too much stock in projecting out where we're going to be in 2020 or 2040 or 2050, for instance, because I think there's a lot that could change between now and then. And that could even be housing preferences and lifestyle preferences, and if we continue to have outmigration here in the state, how's that going to impact things? So there's just a lot of things at play here, and then what other communities do, because we're talking about Wakefield in a vacuum, obviously, because we're talking about our housing production plan. I know you mentioned the regional considerations, and we do have that. I think people are going to move where the jobs are. There are any number of factors that might create a natural migration, and this 95-128 corridor might be very different in 10 years' time than it is today, and that might also really impact the needs, the demands, and the makeup of the person looking to live in our community per se. So I respect all your work. I appreciate the analysis you've conducted and how you've laid it out in a digestible way. I do just think there are a lot of factors at play that create a rather high level of uncertainty that the best assumptions or predictions just ultimately may not bear out for us. So I think we can't lose sight of that in this whole process. Thank you.
Yeah. May I respond?
Only if it's favorable.
Yes, it is.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So I agree. I'll take your points backwards. So I agree. I put a lot of grains of salt in projections. In fact, we, as a practice at JM Goldson, we typically don't include projections like this in our housing production plans for that very reason. We're always nervous that people will take them a little bit too seriously, and there's so many assumptions, like you said, that go into it and factors that you just can't anticipate. So I agree with you. On your first point, I also agree with you, and I would say that the point I was trying to make by using that term overhoused was more to think about how can we give, and I agree, a lot of people want to age in place or age in their homes. We certainly had folks in my own family who preferred to stay in the homes that, that they had lived in a long time rather than move somewhere else. But what we look at more broadly rather than person by person is, do people have the freedom of choice? There are certainly people you could say want to age in their homes. There are other folks that want to stay in the community but would rather not have quite as much maintenance and snow plowing and all these things that come with owning a single family home, for example, the heating costs, the maintenance costs. So it's really about freedom of choice, and that's why we look at what are the household sizes doing and how does that relate to the housing stock, and are we giving people enough freedom of choice so that they can move in Wakefield if they want to stay in the community. So that was the point I was trying to make, and I appreciate your point about the taxes as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Carney. I'll get to you, Doug.
I was kind of looking forward to 2040 myself. So. It's very difficult for folks in Wakefield to downsize in Wakefield and stay in Wakefield. Okay, and so I understand what you're saying from that perspective. My wife and I want to stay in Wakefield, and with good health, we probably will. But things change, and so the quality of life issues come into here too. And you don't know what fate's going to come and what's going to happen tomorrow. So I understand the perspective you're looking at it from, and I'm kind of impressed with the presentation and even the report that I've followed up on, and I think we're going in the right direction.
Councilor Butler.
I would agree with Councilor Carney that we are going in the right direction, and we have been going in the right direction, and Wakefield now is a more affluent, more highly educated, more desirable place to live than at any time in its previous history. And that leads to, an average selling price of $800-something thousand for every single family home. I don't particularly think, and as opposed to Councilor Dombrowski, Wakefield is not, the residents of Wakefield are not overtaxed. And getting to your point there, and this is going to make me sound even more monstrous, but sometimes, being priced out of a community happens. If the community gets better, it's going to price people out. And it's going to, there is going to have to be migration. And yeah, everybody would like to stay in their place. I'm sure there's a lot of people who live on the Cape or lived on Nantucket that would have loved to, but then somebody came by with $3 million and they were like, well, I also like $3 million. So for those, and I don't want to overly, I am decidedly not overly obsequious to our senior community. Our senior community has made a great deal off the fact that the younger demographics in town have changed the town, have changed the value of all of our homes, and has created this situation where there are a healthy number of people who are under-resourced to live in Wakefield right now. And, some of it we can solve
Some of it we can solve with better housing stock and more housing stock. Some of it people have to solve with getting more resources for themselves. And how they do that is up to them, or finding a different place to live. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to change the character of the town and the trajectory of this town as a great place to live. We want to keep that, and that's one of our key goals here as counselors, is making sure that it remains a great place to live. And sometimes that means that you don't get to stay.
Any other counselors, first or second time to be heard? I would just say, Ms. Goldson, that as a member of that exploding demographic of 65 and over, Mike McLean, I'm chair for a couple more meetings, and a fellow empty nester, if you don't count the cats, and a co-creator of our Affordable Housing Trust, along with Councilor Vincent, which I'm a trustee on. I just think that your presentation is excellent, and I very much appreciate it. I think we all understand, we all have some economic background, we all understand that, there are assumptions in any graph like this that we look at. I would point out one thing, though, that you said about 40B, which is I would hope that this current version of the HPP does not assume that we will be at 10% going forward. I think it's very, very likely after the 2030 census that we will fall back under, because it is a hard thing to maintain in many suburban communities. Right now we have the benefit of putting the numbers in the numerator, but we're not backloading all those additional units into the denominator. And I just want people to understand that. We may hit the 10%, we may lose the 10% in the future. A couple of my questions were answered about the affordability, the true affordability, although I don't think, Councilor Butler, that there will be any pitchforks, because when was the last time we made one true affordable unit? Maybe 100 years ago. It's just an extremely difficult thing to do. I certainly don't think we'll be creating true affordable units in that kind of capacity unless, manna falls from the heavens in some fashion. There were a couple of things that really jumped out at me, though, and also congratulations to all of you, including Councilor Vincent and our senior planner, and for the great response you've got on the surveys. I think that is very, very impressive, especially on an issue such as this. As Councilor Vincent said, it wasn't quite the hot button issue that 40A was. But one of the things I was curious about, Ms. Goldson, was the 11.4% rental vacancy in 2022. Are we building too many rental units? Are we allowing too many to be built? That sounded high to me, or am I incorrect?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there, we look at that's really a snapshot in time. So looking at the kind of an overall picture, keeping an eye on that, I wouldn't say necessarily that you're building too many, but I think that that the focus, just in terms of policy, that you could focus on ownership, affordable ownership units, and more ownership housing types as well. That's what that tells me, more than your overbuilding rental. It's more of a, in my mind, that comparison that the ownership vacancy was so tight that's what I would focus on in that graph.
That's a great point, and I would really, really hope that the community can do a little more of that in the future. The other thing that struck me was the 55-45 breakdown between various and sundry multiple units versus single ownership. That seemed higher than I would have suspected. Do you know what it was at the prior HPP?
We do have that, I think, in the report. I'd have to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head, but I do believe single family as a proportion of your total housing stock did go down a little bit. I don't know, Samantha, if you have the figure in your head, but I just don't have it in my head yeah.
I don't have the figure in my head either, but yes, you are correct in that it did go down slightly. We've had a great amount of growth the town and town council has supported for affordable and 40Bs, as well as the inclusionary zoning units that have grown in the last about 10 years.
Right. I would simply say that to me indicates that sometimes when I hear that we're overburdened with single family housing, that this certainly shows that we are not necessarily that far out of line. We have a lot of family and multiple units according to the 55-45 split. That I thought was kind of striking, at least to me. Other than that, those are the only questions I have.
Sorry,
We're
just
not
one detailed question.
Sure, go for it.
And this is in reference to the vacancy rates. It looks like there's a different percentage in the draft of the housing assessment needs chapters than there is on our slides. On our slides, it's 11.4. In the document itself, it's 6.7. Not something to answer now, but just want to highlight that and would love to know.
I'll look at that and, yeah, I'll look at that and make sure that there wasn't an error in one of those. Thank you.
No problem.
Great, good point, thank you. Any other comments from counselors, questions? We exhausted ourselves?
Just getting started.
We don't need a vote on anything here, right, Town Administrator? I very much appreciate your presentation. I love the back and forth, great responses to all of our questions. And congratulations to everybody who's put in the hard work on this, including our senior planner and Councilor Vincent as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I believe we are at Town Administrator Search Committee composition.
You could do that, Mr. Chairman.
Or we could, what else
move
could
down
we
to
do?
item 9 and
We could do that as well, fiscal year 2026 budgets, because we have people in the room. Looks like Budget A is Accounting Department. Want to come up, Kevin?
To get my big book.
Don't drop that one.
I know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members. First budget tonight is the accounting budget. We're recommending that this budget be decreased $8,641 over the current fiscal year. This increase breaks down $8,171 to the tax levy, $470 to water and sewer transfer. The decrease in the personal services portion of this budget is $14,671. The reason for this decrease is we have a new town accountant that started lower on the pay scale. This portion of the budget does include contractual and negotiated increases for the town accountant and the clerical employees for fiscal 26. There is an increase under contractual services of $6,500. This includes the yearly increase in the town's audit, that's $2,000, and for outside professional services, there was an increase of $4,500, and this is for if this department does need any support from outside services or outside contractors. We did have a reduction in the IT department of one position, so a little bit more money in this budget here, the $4,500, is in case we have to bring in someone from the outside for any type of services that we may need. Main expenses within this budget, $28,000 for equipment rental. This includes various departments. We have 7 copy machines and 2 high-speed printers. This includes the town council department, accounting, benefits, tax collector, the building department, council on aging, and the treasurer's office. $8,000 for postage, which is used for mailing the accounts payable checks. The total budget request for fiscal 26 is $488,814, with $466,206 coming from the tax levy and $22,608 coming from a water and sewer transfer.
Questions from councilors on the accounting budget? Councilor Dabrowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gill, for presenting this. Question under the personnel, the personal services breakdown. So, I know that you mentioned that it's budgeted for less. in the upcoming fiscal year because Ms. Rourke had started at the lower end of the pay scale.
Correct.
Now, so you're identified as is Ms. Rourke, and then it lists basically 178,000, which would have been your salary in fiscal 25,
Correct.
basically, right? But then we're at the 154.5. Can you just explain why it is that we have it broken down like that with your name / her Ms. Rourke's name there? Is it because of the first half of fiscal 25 that was your pay, and then the second half as of like January 6th, I guess it was, then it was Ms. Rourke?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
January 1, I would have moved over to the town council budget.
Okay.
So there was a half-year position for assistant town administrator in the town council budget, which is where I'm being paid for right now.
Okay. And then the other piece is, I know, maybe this is better for Mr. Mayo, when we talked about the idea of shuffling or creating a position, you had indicated that there was expected to be a roll-off in this department. But
Yeah,
this
there
doesn't
could be a retirement.
Yeah, that's specifically what I'm referring to.
We don't have that yet.
We don't, but that,
Yeah.
so we don't have a reduction in staff, though, in fiscal 26, is that correct?
Correct, not budgeted.
Right, not budgeted.
Right.
But what I'm getting at is there, so the people that had been in place heading into fiscal 25, I know at the time when we talked about.
There's a possible retirement in there that we may slow roll, or I think the new council and new town administrator may decide that.
Okay. And is the expectation then to fill that position, if in fact?
I think that's something that we'd have to discuss.
Okay.
But there's nothing now.
So there's no
Not yet.
There's not a retirement of anyone
Right.
in this payroll, correct?
No, not as of now.
So it depends on who retires.
Right, it's rumored. I mean, it's rumored.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anything else, Council?
No.
On this?
No.
Okay. Any other questions on this budget from councilors? Councilor Vincent, I do not see a hand raised, so I'm trying not to ignore you out there in the TV land.
I was trying to raise my hand.
Okay, you're good.
I have something, I'll be doing them for free for me.
Yeah, you did lose
Seem
us
to
a
have
little
lost
bit.
you.
We lost your sound there. I don't know if you can hear.
That's okay. I'll have to get back in.
You seem fine now.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Bob.
Go ahead, just move on. I'm
still
having
good.
trouble with the phone.
Now we can hear you, though.
Okay, Kevin. All right, Kevin, this is my last time doing warrants tonight after doing them for 3 years. So while you're at the table, I wanted to thank you and Elizabeth and Jacqueline and Catherine and Judy for taking care of me over these last 3 years with, always answering all my questions about the warrants, getting me them in a timely manner, and preparing me to make concise reports to the town council. So thank you and your staff for helping me. And I thoroughly enjoyed working with all of you on the warrants the last few years. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
Any other questions from council on this budget? Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept budget number 2 for the accounting department?
I move that we accept budget number 2 as presented.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any further questions?
I do.
Yes, sir.
I do just want to say that it does concern me that we had budgeted in 25 with certain expectations, and I'm certainly not trying to force anyone out of their employment, but I think we have to have a better mechanism in place because there were expectations presented to us, for where we were going to land relative to this, and I do think that drove the decision-making process for having shifted, dollars over on the town council side, and that didn't come to bear. And it sounds like because there wasn't any sort of finality in understanding, but I think we didn't basically decide in a final way based upon how things were presented. So it does give me a pause in looking at this budget, that we didn't land where it was presented to us we would have. And this is probably a better discussion when we get to the town council budget relative to this. But I do have some concerns about how we landed here, because we ended up in essence, adding to payroll considerably as a result. And so I think that that's something that we need to really or this council needs to be thinking about going forward, how we approach that kind of decision making.
Councilor Butler?
Sure. Having not been on town council, but I was on the finance committee, I think when they came before us last year, they talked about this, that essentially adding this assistant town administrator position wasn't going to be getting rid of like the town accountant position, and that there was going to be some overlap, and that it wasn't that it was coming necessarily in fiscal 26, but that there would potentially be savings down the line, just to like, not to, I don't defend Steve and Kevin all that often, but I'm like, in this instance, I feel like they did sort of tell us we weren't getting, or they told us in the finance committee that that it was going to be an increase over, 25 to 26 was going to be a big increase, and that we were probably staying there because, frankly, the town, for good or for bad, most towns of our size, and I'm not 100% on that, but have the assistant town administrator position, so that was going to be always going to be an add to, and a relatively not painful, but like, an expensive add to staff. And we've been skating by with a very, like, our town administration costs as a percentage of the overall budget are in like the, either the bottom or the top 1 or 2%. We're among the most frugal around our administration expense relative to budget.
Councilor Dombrowski?
I'm not talking about the position of assistant town administrator. I'm talking about how that was to be funded. And it was presented in a certain way that didn't end up coming to bear. And that's where my concern lies. And so now we're into a second fiscal year with that added cost for payroll, which I personally did not anticipate, and I don't think it was presented as such. So that's where my concern lies. It's not about the position of assistant town administrator.
I hear you.
It's just how we're paying for it, and I feel like now this is a bigger nut for us to, and I understand that this budget is lower, right? Because the personnel is lower, but in the globally, it's
it's not a lower budget.
No, it's not. This particular budget the payroll is less in this department, but it's offset by what we're having in town council. What I'm saying is that we don't have the mechanism vis-a-vis someone. I don't even know I have no idea who the person even was, but that person in the town accountant's office no longer employed. So that's where the rub is for me.
I get it. My memory is similar to yours, but
we are where we are now. So I'm just saying
now.
so,
Yeah.
but I think process-wise going forward.
I hear both of you. Yeah, indeed. Any other questions from the councilors? We have a motion second?
We do.
We do. Okay, seeing no further questions, we'll do the roll call. Councilor Vincent?
Yes.
Councilor Butler?
Yep.
Councilor Butt?
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Councilor Chines?
Yes.
Councilor Carney?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. Thank you very much. That is unanimous, Sherry, and we will move on to the next budget, which looks to me like budget 17, fire department.
Yes.
No, you stay, Liz. She'll just punch you up.
Good evening, Chief. Oh, come on.
Be shy.
Mr. Chairman, the next budget is the fire department budget. We have Chief Sullivan, Deputy Chief with us, Tom Michelle. We're recommending that the fire budget be increased $358,045 over the current fiscal year. The increase in personal services is $344,545. Of that, $294,545 is for contractual and negotiated increases, or 4.1%. There is an increase in the overtime line item of $50,000. Under contractual services, the increase is $9,500. We have an increase in auto maintenance. That was increased $5,000. An increase in radio maintenance, $3,000. And a small increase in unclassified of $1,500, all due to increased costs in current and prior year trends. Under materials and supplies, we have an increase of $4,000. That breaks down $3,000 to motor vehicle parts and $1,000 to medical supplies. The total budget request for fiscal '26 is $7,826,406.
Did you have anything to add, Chief, before I get to questions from the counselors?
Pretty, sums it up pretty well.
Okay, doke, thank you very much. Questions from the counselors on the fire budget? Counselor Chine?
Not so much a question, but just an observation. I mean, you know, this is fundamentally a staffing budget, right? I mean, that is where the vast majority of the costs are sitting. And it seems like a lot of the reality that we are facing is, you know, some bad luck in terms of, you know, firefighters on leave for various medical reasons and other issues that's hitting the overtime budget substantially. Obviously, we're also carrying the impact of the firefighters' contract that was just renewed as well, Mr. Mayo, in July?
July.
Yeah. But, you know, to me, if you're looking at this budget, I mean, the number is sort of set if we are continuing to use the staffing ratios that we have in place in terms of the number of officers that we have on duty, which in my personal opinion, we should be continuing. So you know, while it's 385,000 is always a hard number to swallow, it does feel to me to be a reasonable and appropriate budget for the coming fiscal year.
Thank you. Councilor Dabrowski?
Thank you for the presentation, and Chief, you know, Deputy Chief, thank you for what your department does. I think this budget is just a reflection of the fact that our community is growing and our needs are growing. And when we talk about staffing, the 385, I think, is just one of the costs of that in order to make sure that we're maintaining, you know, the safety, you know, of our residents. So that's just a reality. And when we talk about housing and adding additional units, and we talk about infrastructure costs, this is part of that, as is the case with police as well. I think you have, I think you've been operating in a safe way, but also in a lean way. I think your staffing is reasonable, but you don't have a lot of extraneous folks on. Let's face it. And when you have calls in different directions and complexities that we may not have had, when we have housing units that are many floors taller than would have been the case even 15 years ago, you know, those are all considerations that have to go into this budgeting. I think my concern for the department is less about this operational budget, but more about how we're looking from a capital standpoint, because I'm sure you've heard, you know, discussions that have even been raised here. The idea of we're talking about pumper trucks, we're talking about, you know, ladder trucks, you know, all these sorts of things that are going to be, you know, coming down the pike. I know the lead times for those are very long, and so the notion that there be a real thoughtful analysis going on within your department and that dialogue with, you know, I think capital planning is really important, because I don't want to see the department in a situation where resident safety is compromised because our equipment isn't up to task. I know the life cycle of where we're at with a lot of the equipment we have, and I also appreciate the costs involved with that, but that's a non-negotiable. That has to happen. And so I would really encourage your department in this upcoming fiscal year to think about how we can do that, how we can phase in those expenditures in a way to make sure that you have the equipment you need to keep everyone safe, and it's done in a responsible and timely way, from a financial standpoint. Because that to me is the bigger issue that the fire department faces now and will face in the coming years. But I can't say enough about what you do as a department, and I know you've been squeezing the life out of all that those trucks and the like, and I know we've had good success, but they have a life expectancy, right? And for several pieces of the major equipment that is not inexpensive, we need to look at that, and maybe some of that if we have future development when we talk about negotiating with developers, how we can fund those sorts of things. I know a lot of other communities, I think we do a good job of that, certainly in terms of getting what we can out of developers. But I know a lot of other communities, especially when we're talking about height, structures that are going to be higher, what can we get out of those developers? I'm thinking ahead of the lake. What's that going to mean? That's a lot of calls potentially, right? When it's because a lot of units. There's some height to that. There's a lot of things to be thinking about. So I just think the more you can focus on the capital planning side of things and looking long range, I think that's really where I see the potential crisis being created in the years to follow.
Town Administrator?
Yeah, I say because of that, there is a 2 to 3 year lead time.
Yeah.
And it seems to be growing.
Currently, right.
We do plan, we've talked to capital planning, I've talked to the chief and the deputy, putting a pumper on the warrant for this year. It'll be 2 or 3 years before the mini bonding hits on that. But it is, you're right, we need to start that going. And then in less than 10 years, we got to talk about the ladder truck, probably in 7 years. So we are trying to keep ahead of that, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Are you good?
I am, thank you.
Councilor Vincent, you have a hand up? Councilor Vincent, can you hear me?
He's very still.
He's very still. Did you have something, Councilor Butler, in the
Sure.
meantime?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with the live, Councilor.
All right. I always have
Yeah,
some
can you hear me?
issues here. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Councilor.
Well, you've got Bob, get him.
My phone is going in and out. I want to just say a couple things for the council in particular and the community at large. In 2021, the fire department answered 3,999 calls. I wish I had known that in December of 2021 because I would have actually called them New Year's Eve, so they would have had an even 4,000. But this year they did.
I don't know they would have appreciated that, Bob.
This year they did 4,726. So when you look over the last few years, they've increased their calls from 4,000 by 700 and some over the last 4 years. In 2021, that pumper, we have 4 pumpers, and one of them is a 2,000 pumper. The one that Mr. Mayo talked about, a Warren article. It was 21 years old in 2021. The life expectancy of one of those pumpers is 20 years. Now, in 2024, with an increase of over 720 calls, that pumper is now 24 years old, which is 4 years past its life expectancy, and order to delivery is 2 to 3 years. Right on the heels of that is going to be the 2006 pumper, which is going to hit its 20-year life expectancy in 2026. And if we order one of those in around 2027, we're not going to see that until 2030. And then as Mr. Mayo just alluded to, the ladder truck is dated 2013, and that's much more expensive than the pumper engines. And that life expectancy is 20 years, and that will hit in 2033. So the town has a lot of major equipment purchases that are going to be necessary in order to maintain the public safety, the great public safety that our fire department has provided to the town. And as the town continues to grow, those numbers of calls they have each year is just going to keep going on up. So it's imperative to me that Wakefield start taking care of these purchases on these pumper engines to this decade, and then another one in the early part of the 2030s, the next decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Butler?
Okay, so I will start with my feelings on the pumpers and the, useful life of these things. Every single article of either fire equipment or frankly of heavy machinery that we have, I'm sure the high school probably has a useful life of 25 years, but I don't think we plan on holding on to the high school for 25 years. And frankly, I think that our pumper trucks and our ladder trucks, we know, and by the way, where we are now is we're at 20, going to end up 26, 27 years for the pumper. I think that's what you should expect. You shouldn't that's like the manufacturer saying like, oh, it's 20 years. But really, I think every town probably doesn't replace them every 20. They probably replace them every 30. One of my issues with this budget here and with the presentation that it's a $380,000 increase or something like that is that it's a fiction that it's going to be $380,000. Because, again, the overtime this year it's always higher, and we know that's always higher, and it's like the old snow budget. We put a fictional number on the page, and we always do a reserve fund transfer of $400,000. So don't think that we're going to be, that it's a $300,000 increase. It's probably a $700,000 or an $800,000 increase. And yes, I know Councilor Chines has talked about and we have it for at least another 2 years. All of this, or a lot of this dramatic increase in the budget stems from when we increased minimum manning and when we did the SAFER grant. We probably, I don't know that we're overstaffed, but we certainly are, we are over minimumed probably. And the notion that we're talking about like a lot of new housing. Bob, our population is not projected to grow dramatically over the next 15 years. So I don't think we're having this massive population explosion coming to Wakefield. And yes, we do have newer housing and more multifamily housing that's being built. But of those 4,000 calls, again, we get the 4,000 calls. We don't really get I think we could get a great breakdown on them. But the number of calls where it's doing nothing or not doing nothing but showing up and making sure everything is okay, either it's a call that's tagged along with the ambulance or the fire, that we have to send people out on everything. Look, yeah, that's expensive, and I'm fine with it. We have a great fire department. We have great firefighters, but don't pretend that we're going to have a minimally increased budget. This budget, you're definitely coming in hot this year, and I don't know if it's going to double. Is the overtime do we think the overtime is going to run this same rate for the year? Yeah, we do. So instead of 640 what did we appropriate? We appropriated 630. We're going to come in at 1.3 million. What do you think? Why do we think that's going to change? Why do we think it's going to magically get down to 680 next year? I guess that's a question for you guys. Why do we think the 680 is a reasonable number around this? And why, again, I don't think this was a greatly negotiated, contract. I think we're stuck with it. No offense.
Well, I think it was.
I know you think
it was pretty.
But
I got to say that minimum manning, if I can,
increase.
I think the safety of the citizens of Wakefield and my firefighters is number one. And when you hear horror stories from other towns that don't have minimum manning, a firefighter's legs got snapped off in Melrose.
Anecdotal. So yes,
well, that's factual. But
no,
okay.
no, but it's anecdotal.
We've
but
had
it's
these
just
arguments
picking
before.
one thing out. Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous line of work. There are going to be accidents.
Do you want to address the question on overtime, Chief?
Yeah, the overtime that's budgeted every year is budgeted under the assumption that we can maintain 4 groups of 13 with an 11-man minimum. It used to be 4 groups of 12 with a 10-man minimum. I'll be the first to admit to you, Doug.
At one point?
I'll be the first to admit to you, Doug, that we haven't been able to do that because of a variety of reasons. People out on leave, military leave, injury leave, and we've had a lot of injuries this year, obviously, and it's driven numbers up. I can't predict how many department members are gonna be injured. Unfortunately, the injuries that they're sustaining are long-term injuries that require, months to recover from.
No,
Or
that isn't the concern. The concern is the big move is the move from 4 of 12 to 4 of 13. That's where the personal services budget and the overtime budget explodes. And not that we were sold a bill of goods on this, but that this was clearly not well forecasted, either at this council or at the finance committee back then.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, the discussion bothers me because in the early 70s, your late
You mean
father...
when we had fires?
Your late father, the chief's late father was on the force at the time, and our firefighters weren't as healthy as they are today. We have a healthy group of people who try to stay in shape, try to keep their health going, okay? We lost Lieutenant Ford, and that was a crisis for the whole community. I don't understand how we can be talking less than minimum manning. And I want to tell you an interesting story about
It's not
capital
less than,
outlay
it's
because
reducing minimum manning.
because back in the 70s we had a CETA program. We hired people, government gave us money, sort of like the funds you just received during COVID, and we were hiring people off the street to hire them. And the budgets were much tighter than they were. And I sat down with the late Chief Mahoney at the time, and I was the liaison of the fire department. And things were so tight, we had to make the choice between hose, because in 1970-71, the town was being burned down, unfortunately by a local police officer. And, we had a tough row to hoe. And I remember making the decision with the chief. I says, Chief, which do you need most, the hose or this Hearst tool? He said, I need the hose. And the front page of the paper the next day had Connie cancels the jaws of life. Okay? So, it was serious stuff. We didn't have the wealth we had now. And again, AAA bonding, we can afford it. The one thing we can afford in this community is to give public safety, and I'm proud of both departments, and we have to stand behind them. And the other aspect of that is community support of other communities. If we do not have the workforce here to respond and to assist them when they're having a problem, then they're not going to assist us. The mutual aid system is an important thing on this. The fact that, maybe it hasn't happened to anyone here, but I've had the fire department show up at my house, and I was happy they came. And it's an important aspect of our community. It's an important service we provide. I'm 100% support of this budget, and I don't like talking about getting rid of mandatory levels of workforce, because the fact that this is what they need to run the department, and I support that 100%.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
Councilor Shin.
Thank you. I just, on the minimum staffing, I think it's worth mentioning that we're not actually adding staff in this budget. We made the decision, I think I was on FinCom when we started down that road of getting to four shifts of 13.
We didn't ever make that decision, this group under them, because we don't have any say on the contract.
No, I understand that, but my point is, I think we started down that road of getting to the staffing level that we're at. It's been a long time. It's been, again, I think it predates my time on the council when we sort of started down that path. I just mentioned that because, regardless of sort of what we think about that path, and I think, Doug, you and I have served together on the FinCom before, so we've kind of debated this before. That is the path that we're on. That is the path that, prior iterations of this council and this council previously have decided is important from a staffing standpoint. And so when we look at this budget again, what we're budgeting for regular salary is really contractual and, kind of negotiated increases. On the overtime, we have more often than not missed the overtime. That is absolutely true. And I think if you look at the trajectory of the budget, we're budgeting now for fiscal 2026, if we approve this budget, something like 50% more in overtime than we have, going back even just 3 or 4 years ago. I think that's important because I had that same frustration historically of, gee, we're always missing the overtime budget. Why don't we just budget the right number? I think we should be honest in how we budget. I think we've gotten there. I do think, though, when you look at our experience for the current fiscal year, it is a pretty significant outlier. Just if you look year over year over year of what we've expected to spend, you guys have gotten hit hard this year. You know, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's random. You know, this happens. This is life. I mean, you see the same thing in health insurance. You see the same thing in every, you know, field where you're kind of dependent on the laws of chance. We happen to be in a situation this year where the laws of chance have hit us hard, and we will have to do a reserve fund transfer, I imagine, at town meeting to cover fiscal year 2025. But I don't think it changes the fact that if you look longitudinally over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, I think that we have made moves to address some of the concerns that Councillor Butler has raised. Will that be what covers all of the budget in fiscal year 2026? I don't think any of us could say at this point, right? You're making the best judgment you can based on the estimates that you have. But I think that we've made the right budgeting decisions historically, and I think what you're proposing here is a continuation of that as we think about fiscal 26.
I feel like I need to make a couple of points.
Please.
First of all, it's not realistic for a fire truck to last 30 years. It just isn't.
How long did the last ladder truck last? How long did the last pumper truck last? They both lasted more than that.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, the
It was
last pumper truck we
1996,
bought?
and it was replaced in, let's see,
The last two are 2017 and 2021.
Yeah, he's talking about the ladder. You talking about the ladder truck?
Yeah, I'm talking about the ladder truck.
Yeah, the ladder truck's a 2013. The one before it was a
13.
1995.
What
Yeah,
was the
that's
one that
not-
wouldn't fit in the, what's the one that you replaced out of Greenwood that you ended up trying to sell to like, for scrap to somebody, Melrose or someone like that?
It went to Malden for $3,000. And they went, and you know, it was in such great shape that the exhaust system fell out of it when they backed it into the station. You know, it's, you know, what are we doing? Fire trucks don't last 30 years, not realistically. Now, this one may end up sitting there for 30 years if,
Right.
you know, because of the long lead time to get another fire truck. But it's not a good practice to assume that they're going to last 30 years.
No, but I don't think it's an affordable practice to think they're only gonna last 20, like Councilor Vincent was suggesting.
I pointed out that the 2001 is well past 20 years. The year is 2025. It's already 25 years old.
Yeah, no, and that's where it's, I think that's where we're gonna be. And I threw out 30, 25. I'm not on the trucks issue here, and I think there's nothing, the budget, you know, the budget, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, you can't not, overtime's covered, and everything's sort of in line, and it's contractual, so like, you know, I mean, I'm gonna approve, because there's nothing.
1 second, Councilor.
Not to.
You said you had a couple of things you wanted to address, Chief. I want to make sure you get it.
Well, the staffing, you keep mentioning the fact that the staffing went from 10 to 11. That allows us to operate 3 companies of 3 firefighters in each company. That's extremely important for firefighter safety. And given the fact that our run count is going up 9% on an average every year, it's necessary that we have the 3 people on each piece. We had 2 people on the ladder truck when it was 10. It wasn't safe.
Why is the run count going up so much?
I don't know. I would love if I guess if I could answer that, I'd be in a different pay grade.
I mean, no, you're in the top one. What, like, you know, in terms of what our folks go out on, what, do we have that breakdown?
75% of our calls are emergency medical calls, so probably the bulk of the increase would be in emergency medical calls.
Right, and so who goes out on emergency medical? You guys, ambulance, and police, right?
Yes, usually, yes. They don't all arrive at the same time, Doug.
No, I know, but what, you know, it's normally like, I guess, yes. There's no fighting this, so it doesn't make sense, but, yeah. Does a fire truck need to show up when somebody has a heart attack?
Or when somebody
Yes, if
breaks their
nobody else
foot?
is, if nobody else is gonna show up for 15 minutes, yes. You know, fire trucks
So-
have defibrillators, we have EpiPens.
Okay,
Well,
no.
Well, you asked me a
That-
question, I'm
no,
gonna
no,
answer it.
Great.
You know,
Then the question is to Cataldo, why the hell aren't they there in less than 15 minutes?
that's a pretty good question. They don't work for me.
Right.
And there's a lot of, that's an industry-wide issue, not just Cataldo. Action and all the other ambulance services that are out there. I guess the point I'm trying to make, Doug, I understand what you're saying, but if, God forbid, somebody at your house has a heart attack, okay? And they get out, okay? You want somebody there, typically we're there within 3 minutes. We have defibrillators, you know, we can work on you. We can start doing CPR on you, we can defibrillate you, we can take, you know, actions while we're waiting for a paramedic unit to show up. Yes, once they show up, they can do a lot, but those few minutes that go by are critical.
Yeah. And then, so why don't we have, since most of them are EMTs, why don't we have ambulance within our group?
It hasn't been negotiated.
You might find that being much more expensive too.
We have, man.
Yeah, go ahead, Council.
I was on the board that started an ambulance service, and we had it with the police department. There were too many injuries with the police department, and the fire department got involved, and so we went out for contract, for the first contract on service. And in agreement with that was the fact that with that service, the original service, we would have the fire department back them up, and it was a lot more healthier that way. And as I mentioned earlier, quite frankly, our firefighters and police officers weren't as healthy back then as they are today, and they really take care of themselves today, and that's an important thing. But it didn't work out, and the fact that the town was going to be charged for these services, and that broke down even further. But it's been, I think, a great relationship to have the fire department respond. I needed that service once, and they were there for me, so I appreciate it. And the fact that I'm sure anybody else who had someone respond to their house appreciated it as well. It's an important aspect of the community. It's part of our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Dobrowski.
I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that we've had a significant population increase. And when you're talking, Chief, about the time during which you had that equipment, if you look at 2000 versus 2010, the census figures, it was a negligible increase in population in this town. 2010 through 2020, or even more specifically through 2024, there was an explosion of population. We're talking like, if you look at numbers that bring you through 2024, it's over 10% population increase. It wasn't even 1% from 2000 to 2010. So what does that mean in practical terms? Well, as we were discussing earlier, of course your call volume is going to go up, right? There's more people, but also with call volume, you're using the trucks more, aren't you? If you have 500 more calls, that's 500 more times you're using those trucks. So I don't think it's appropriate to even look at, all right, from 95 until 13, that was the lifespan. Well, how many calls did those trucks go to from 95 to 2013? Because I'm sure that the number, you want to think about like the number of miles, right, if you will, on those trucks from 2010 to 2024, exponentially more, right? Or at least considerably more, than you had been. And from the numbers that I'm hearing, even in recent years, your call volume has gone up. So I don't care if it's because it's a medical call or there's a smell of smoke, it's a carbon monoxide, whatever the case is, you're heading out, you're using that equipment. So if you have a 20-year lifespan, yeah, can you eke a few years out of that? Perhaps, yeah. But I don't think that even looking at past history, when we had a smaller population and a smaller call volume, is indicative of what we're looking at on a go-forward basis. So I don't think we can rely on those numbers because our population is larger and your call volume is greater. So you've had inevitably more runs, and that's a number that you have. You keep that data.
Yeah, when I started as chief, we had 2,818 calls, and we're at 4726.
So your equipment is, based on your numbers there, is having about 2,000 more runs, right? In a given year now than when you first started.
Yes.
So to say that the equipment you had 20 years ago, you can eke maybe 23 years out of it, but the equipment that that we have now, we can still eke those 23 years out with 2,000 more calls, in comparison. That's not realistic. Like, think about anyone with their own car at home. If you were taking, if your daily trips were, if you're going, twice a week somewhere, and then suddenly you're going 5 times a week, of course the wear and tear is going to be more, right? And that's precisely what the numbers bear out. Your numbers, the population numbers, and there's a direct correlation between population and number of calls.
And the trucks aren't made the same either. There's a lot more electronic components in them. Just the emission systems in them are ridiculously expensive, and probably, to be honest, not necessary in a fire truck anyway. I can understand if it was an 18-wheeler truck that was out all the time driving around all over the country, but a fire truck that primarily a good amount of its time, maybe not as much as it used to, sits stationary. I just question whether we really need that. But that's not the point. The point is it drives up the cost. There's more sensors and electronics in them that can break. It's easy to put a modern day pumper out of service than it is the old Macs that we used to have when I started, which they would last 30 years because they were built really well,
I'd argue probably any sort of most automotive or trucks are built now better than they were in the 70s. Let's not manufacturing's gotten better, but here's the problem. I want to understand, and I think you all need to understand, you need to be able to explain to us at least, our population's gone up maybe 10% and our call volume has almost doubled. What's going on? Like, why is our call volume so much higher? Like, what's happened there?
So I could actually...
You're a healthcare guy.
Besides age and mental health?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there are a couple of things. So one certainly is the population has not only increased, but it's also aged. And, the number of emergency calls that you see, for medical reasons as people age, I mean, it is not a linear relationship. It is an exponential relationship, unfortunately. I think the greater burden of illness, including behavioral health conditions, I suspect is another big piece of it. I'd imagine a number of the calls that you get are folks in behavioral health crisis as well.
Speak plainly. Do you mean like suicides or drug ODs?
Both.
Okay.
And then I would suspect that one of the other factors, at least in the last couple of years since the pandemic, is more people are at home. And so, individuals of our age that may, have had medical emergencies at work in an office at one point in time are having those emergencies at home to some extent. And I would suspect that that's a factor. But nonetheless, my point in sort of asking to be recognized was just suggesting that we move the question on the budget. I think there's a lot of discussion around the equipment, which we will have when we get to the capital budget, but we're not there today. And so, Mr. Chair, if I could make a motion to approve the operating budget of the fire department for fiscal 2026 is presented.
One thing first. Did you, Chief, get to address everything that you wanted to?
I'm fine.
Okay. Motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Counselor, I'm going to give the second to Counselor Butler.
I'll give it to him.
Okay.
I think it's
All
my
right.
first one ever, so.
Any further discussion, and be careful. We've had a lot of discussion. All right, thank you for no further discussion. We'll do a first, because we have somebody remote, we have to do it this way. Counselor Vincent.
Yes.
Counselor Butler.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Dabrowski.
Aye.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney.
Yes.
And I am also yes. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Good seeing you, as always.
Thank you for the work you do.
We had skipped over town administrator. Do you want
Do you want to just go to cable?
to go to cable?
Cable and then
Why don't we
Kevin
do
and-
that?
Kevin and
Why don't
Liz
we
can
do
leave.
that? Let's do cable.
Last issue tonight is the cable TV public access enterprise budget. This budget, we're recommending a decrease
$65,716 over the current fiscal year. This budget is funded by receipts of our cable providers, which are Verizon, Comcast, and RCN. This budget is based on prior year and current year revenues, both actual and budgeted revenues. Revenues have been trending down. In fiscal '26, we're estimating a decrease in revenues of $28,216 and a reduction in the capital payments that we receive of $37,500. In fiscal '25, the current year that we're in, we received the final payment for capital from Verizon. So that's why that will be going down in fiscal '26. This budget, the personal services line item for fiscal '26 is $140,000. And this line item is used for salaries at the Wakefield High School for 2 teachers in their media department. The contractual services line item of $328,500 is used for payments to WCAT. The capital revenue line item of $25,000 is split between the Wakefield Public Schools and WCAT, 1/3 to the Wakefield Public Schools, 2/3 WCAT, based on the number of channels that each is in charge of. The total budget request for fiscal '26 is $493,500.
Any questions from counselors on this budget? Seeing none, entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the cable television budget as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Counselor Vincent.
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Oh, yes, I thought we were recognizing Councilor Vincent.
I'm trying to push this one around the horn quickly. Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dobrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, Sherry, that's 7-0. Thank you very much for presenting again tonight and bearing with us. Okay. Let's see, who did I skip over here?
Back to 8D.
8D, Town Administrator Search Committee composition. Would you like to start that one off, Town Administrator, or would you like us to start it off?
I guess I can. I think that the council asked to have this on the agenda for this meeting.
Yes.
To discuss the composition of the search committee. So that's how I'm starting. I'm restating the.
Okay.
But it was what you guys wanted.
Can I ask your opinion? Just kick it
Sure.
right off?
Sure. I mean, I think that there should be a search committee. I think I expressed this to the town council before. I think that it should be a committee made up of citizens, not of town councilors, and they can then bring at least 3 unranked finalists back to the town council for appointment. That is the same process that was used before, and I think it worked out well. Did it work out well, John?
I'm not sure yet.
So I think that, but it's up to the town council. I will say that we did reach out to firms that will help with the recruitment process. We did have 3 inquiries, and we did receive actually 2 submissions that will be presented to the town council, or they'll be invited in here actually to be interviewed at your next meeting on the 24th, as the council requested.
And because you've had experience with this, can I just ask you just a little more fleshing out of what you would see this, you personally, it's other people who are going to make the final decision, you know that, but what kind of compositions have you seen where you've worked in these capacities? I
have been asked to serve on committees in other communities, which I think was kind of unusual, and it was kind of an honor. But it was, you had the recruitment firm that kind of managed the process for the committee. Maybe you had someone from the finance committee committee. Some of them had town employees or employee on the search committee as well. In fact, that's where I first met Liz Rourke, was when she worked at North Reading. We both served on the North Reading Town Administrator or Town Manager Search Committee. And the recruitment firm will, does all the advertising, does all of that stuff, and then presents you with a number, or the committee with a number of resumes that we went through and then decided who to interview, and then actually scored them, and then presented them forward to the Board of Select.
Is there a general number you've seen in terms of how large or small these committees?
That committee was, I think, around 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Good input. Open it up to the councilors. Councilor Dabrowski.
So I had asked to have this on the agenda because I think it's important that we really get something, into formation. I have a question for you, Mr. Chairman, for Town Council Mullen. As far as our charter is concerned relative to this process, I know it's not overly prescriptive, right?
It's not. You have to have a screening committee of some kind.
Right.
But it could be a subcommittee of your council. It could be a screening committee made up entirely of people not on your council, or it could be a hybrid. And the size is not prescribed.
My personal opinion relative to this is obviously an odd number of people. But I think for many of the reasons that Town Council Mullen had raised before about the idea of maintaining anonymity of applicants until such time as one becomes a finalist, the idea of the screening committee, while required by the charter, is also necessary in order to get the kind of applicants we want. I'm envisioning this firm that we're hiring, obviously to give, presumably we do, to offer us guidance relative to how that looks in terms of finding applicants, but I see them more from a recruiting standpoint, where I see the committee that gets formed really, they're closest to the ground here. If we go with Wakefield residents, which would be my strong preference to see, it's folks who understand our community, live within our community, and get it. And while I think the firm that is hired does add value because they have experience from a process standpoint, it's Wakefield residents who know what our community's needs are. Let's face it. We all, as town councilors, have the honor of serving on the town council, but we have a voice already. So I think this screening committee is an opportunity for residents who don't have the voice that we have every 2 weeks when we meet here, to be able to review and weight and prioritize who they think best represents the future of our town. So I think a good cross-section of residents is important. I don't think town councilors do enough. The town councilors don't have to have their hand in everything. Ultimately, the town council will be selecting this person, so that's the most important, part. Short of making sure we have a good, solid pool of finalists, and I should say, in a broader pool of applicants. And so I think the search firm folks deal with broadening that pool as much as possible with quality candidates. The resident committee then culls through those applications and decides the best 3 or 4, whatever that might be. And then this town council has the most important responsibility ultimately of selecting that person. But I don't think we need town councilors in the mix until that time. I think this is an opportunity for our residents to be able to have their voices heard in the process.
Councilor Chines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are you all set? I'm sorry.
I am. Yeah.
No, there are a few things I want to highlight there, because I absolutely agree. I agree that it's important to have a search committee because of the anonymity that provides for the screening process. I think what you laid out in terms of the delineation of roles of the search firm and the search committee is spot on. I also agree that I don't think there should be town councilors on the search committee. As I think about this search, I think about how do you get sort of 360-degree feedback into the process, right? And we're kind of the managers of this individual that we're hiring, and we're going to have that input because we're going to be the ones that make the final decision. I think the search committee is an opportunity to also make sure that we have resident and constituent feedback into the process I would say, though, it's also feedback from some of the individuals' direct reports in town hall, as well as peers. And, you know, as I think about those two elements, you know, I think there's value in having, you know, some combination of a deputy town administrator, you know, a director of HR being involved in the process, so that, again, you have that sense of feedback from folks that are working in town hall and can, you know, opine on who might be a good fit. But again, I think peer feedback is also important. And, you know, when I think of two of the relationships that are really key for the town administrator, one is the school superintendent, and I think, Mr. Mayo, you and Dr. Lyons have an incredibly strong and collaborative relationship that I hope we'll be able to replicate with whoever your successor is. And I think another one is the town council, Mr. Mullen, not to kind of sign you up for something new. But I think as we think about this process, I would love to see for that search committee, again, some combination of people that sit in that sort of direct report and peer space in addition to constituents. I think in my mind, somewhere in the 7 to 9 range is the right size for the committee. But I think with that number, we could really find, you know, robust participation from, you know, sort of each of those three groups. I would also say, as we think about resident feedback, to me that could include like a representative from the finance committee, if that's where we thought we need to go, given that those are residents of the community as well. But again, I wholeheartedly agree with Councilor Dombrowski around the role, the division of labor between the committee and the search firm, and in this case, I would say, sort of lack of need to have representation from the town council on the search committee itself.
Councilor Carney.
Last time, Mr. Chairman, we were successful.
I mean, 17 years, if we weren't, we really had
we had people apply, and each selectman at the time could pick out one, say, okay, this person represents my viewpoint. And I think that's important, and I respect what you're saying, Jonathan, but I think that when it gets to us, that's when we want the input from the school superintendent. We want the input from the chief financial officer. I hate to put people on the committee who are going to influence the committee. And sometimes you put a certain person of title or stature on a committee, and people are going to turn around and say, well, what do you think? And I don't want that. I want everyone here who will be present on the council at the time to have a voice in this. And I think it's important, and it worked out last time, and I use that as evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
I do, but I was
Nothing?
I was waiting for somebody else to speak. I've talked a lot.
I don't see a hand by Councilor Vincent. Do you have anything? I didn't see a hand. I just wanted to check.
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Butler?
Look, I'm in the minority here, I think, but I do think it's an abdication of our responsibilities if we don't see anybody other than the 3 people selected for us at the public commentary. I think it's an incredible abdication of what we're hired to do. You're like, oh, counselors do enough. This is the most important thing we can do. So, like, yeah, I mean, do I need to see, you know, no offense to the town accountant, do I need to sit through the town accountant's budget for us to all say yes? Yeah, contractually we have to, but does that mean that that's an important thing for us to do? Oh, it's not. And I think the idea that we're going to have, that we need to hear, no other organization would ever go to its customers to figure out, like, who they should hire as their CEO. Like, we don't, at the bank, we don't poll our customers and poll some of our best ones to figure out, like, who we should hire. No, we do it ourselves. And so I do think it has to be, if it is not going to be us, then it should be primarily people who are going to have to work with the town administrator. Not random friends of the council from the town. It should be, you know, I don't know if it's the head of the finance department, or if it's town council, or if it's some combination. And it probably shouldn't be, like, 9 sounds like too many people to, like, actually go through and vet and interview
all the folks. This is probably, and it's going to take you a long time for everybody to get this. And I guess the other question is, and this maybe goes to Council Mullen or to Steve, we have to do at least 3, but we're not limited to 3, right? So we could tell them find 5, or we could tell them whatever.
Oh, yeah, you're not limited at all.
We're not
You know what
limited.
you
We
want,
can
no.
only, but we have to do
No.
3. It's like a bidding process for a contract.
Well, no, because when I sat on North Reading's,
Yeah.
for some reason that I was not able to persuade, the committee voted just to move 2 people forward. And my thing was, I thought, and they had no charge from the Board of Selectmen there. My point was that we should be sending more forward. 2 was kind of crazy.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, I just want to add to that. I agree, 2 is kind of crazy. The Attorney General weighs in here, and it's not law, but she prefers that you have 3 at least, because this implicates the open meeting law. You know, by what right do you do this behind closed doors? And if you're going to use this process to send up just 2, or worse, just 1 name, then in effect, the whole process or close to it is being done in secret.
Oh, no, we were not going less than 3. We were saying, is there an issue of going more than 3 coming to us?
The only issue there is practical, which is to say the greater the number
The
of
less likely
finalists,
people are going to want to be
the
public.
less people are going to credit that process. They're going to think, oh, now it's just not worth my while to risk my current job by trying to get this nice Wakefield gig.
Maybe. Okay.
Counselor?
One thing I'd want to highlight on this point is, let's say if they send 3, we as the council could decide we don't like any of them, right?
Right.
We're not obligated to select one of those 3. We could go back and say, hey, you didn't sort of send forth candidates that were to our liking, try again. So as we think about sort of abdicating responsibility, I really don't see it that way, because it ultimately is our choice. And if we are dissatisfied with the choices that the search committee puts in front of us, we have absolute discretion to say, try again, or, we're going to disband the search committee and maybe put together a different group that we think is more responsive to what we want to see. To me, the search committee is a reflection of the fact that as a public body, we have to do this in public the more that we're involved. And, while that means the process doesn't look like the hiring process that you'd have at the bank or that I'd have in a healthcare organization, I think that's just the reality of being a public body.
But I don't think we need to go out. I think my response to that is that I don't think we're not tasked with going out to the townsfolk. To like we're not tasked with getting their opinions on this, because frankly, that's what they hired us to do.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I would say I look at it as more of a 360, right? Like, I do want town employees on the search
Oh, I
committee.
want town employees there. I don't think I want citizens there.
Well, but I guess where I would say for citizens, you could have citizens invited, or you could also take the approach of saying we have citizens that work on a number of different boards and committees that work with the town administrator. So you could have the chair of the finance committee, you could have the chair of capital planning or whatever. That may be the way that we want to think about it. So it's sort of citizen input, but mediated through these structures and boards that already exist as part of our town governance process.
Can I just add that I like the idea of us not being on a search committee, having a search committee. Everyone, Jonathan, that you've listed has been a male. And so and that's just the way that it is.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to have a search committee, whether it's members of the public. I would think about former people of this board who know the work. We have some great people who sat on this board who would know it. I just wouldn't want, so I want to be cognizant of what the total of the search committee looks like. I think, yes, people in those positions know what we need. I do think we need the town voice, though. It is somebody who represents the direction of this town. We know it best, and I will be the final say. But I do think, we've got some former colleagues on school committee, on town council, others who can play that voice. Because everyone you've listed, and I know it's not intentional, but
No,
in my head,
it's a really good call
it's
out.
all males.
Yeah.
And that's not who, as we're thinking about a town manager for the future, I just want to make sure we have a good search committee or selection committee, whatever we're calling it.
Yeah, no, Point
No
well taken.
mantle.
No, thank you. Good allyship. Can I also ask, just with the search committee, so like, will the town council have input in the job description? Like, because I feel like that's where we also weigh in of what we're looking for before they post it, right? Or is that the search
Well, I
committee
think
job?
that you have, if I may, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
I don't want to jump in. Well, if you do, well, first of all, there are items in the charter that need to be listed, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you choose to go with a recruiter, then that's where you would have the input with them, because they'll do the dissemination of that. So I would expect that you would work with the recruiter to approve a job description.
But who will? So just use,
The
so
town
the town
council.
council will
Yeah.
meet with
Oh,
the
yeah.
recruiter,
Right.
not the search, like,
Well, I think.
before the search
I
committee?
think, yes, I think that you,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so that makes me more, sorry, that makes me more comfortable also, because I think, when, there's a bunch of us who have done hiring before, like, I write the job description and then I have HR recruiters go and find it and bring me the best candidates. But I think us being involved in that, beyond what's in the charter, like us having a say and just, adding our years of what we think would be really helpful too. So then it's not like we don't get to see anything.
Counselor?
And I would just underscore that we have this firm that's likely to be hired, and they do this. So when we're talking about the broader pool that hopefully they're able to attract to this role, and candidly, I think that this is probably a highly coveted position. I think we're the envy of a lot of communities, and so I think we'll probably have a great applicant pool to pull from. But that search firm, or those recruiters, are going to be a big part of helping to identify who it is that is even applying for this. And they may know from other searches they've done, some exceptional candidates that for whatever reason weren't the perfect fit and whatnot. So it's not like we're just asking residents to come together and post something on Indeed and see what kind of applicants we get. There's already, in essence, I'll call it more than a pre-screening of, candidly, probably a rather thorough screening, ultimately, of, and we'll hear about it in our next meeting, of the candidates that are even applying. So I think I expect we'll have a quality pool to begin with. And then I do value the input of residents. And when I said that, town council does enough, what I mean is, like, town council doesn't run the town by itself. Like, we have 40 boards, commissions, and committees for a reason, because this is a team effort. So we happen to be kind of at the helm of the executive branch here, but we have a lot of folks, and I think as an employer myself, yeah, I would be interested in the feedback of clients if I were looking to hire a new attorney. I'd want to know what the clients are looking for in an attorney, and so it's not unheard of to have resident taxpayers who have been engaged with the town and have had good experiences, bad experiences, or indifferent experiences, to be able to kind of offer that perspective. And I would hope we have a very diverse group of residents that would be a part of this, that would all come at it from a different place. And I would hope that in the selection of those people, we would be thinking about what their background and experience would bring to the table in reviewing these resumes. And so I think we have the safeguards in place to make sure we have quality candidates. I think a critical role for us is to determine the composition of that committee that's in reviewing these applications. That's a really important piece to this. And then from there, ultimately, it's the town council that will make that final decision. So I don't see it at all as an abdication. I see it as an expansive process that's far more comprehensive than just 7 individuals making it. Thank you.
Councilor Butler.
The only other thing that I sort of want to chime in on, and it's not something that we can be explicit about, but that's something we should think about, is, are we hiring, what is our plan for this next administrator? Is it a 3 to 5 year administrator, or is it hoping to be a 20-year administrator? And granted, you could go into it. I think back to the hiring of Zreich on the school as he was never going to be more than a 6-year hire. Is somebody who's clearly like looking at the stage of their career, they're looking to move on. I think, you know, we have been blessed to be, what is it, we've got something like 50 years that if I had grown up here, I'd probably known 3 town administrators. I don't know that we can expect that going forward, but are we hoping to hire for that? And maybe that's a conversation we have with the search committee when they come in, and maybe that's not even, you know, again, maybe I'm running afoul of HR laws here by even bringing it up, but are we hiring,
I think it's
are
a
we looking to
3-year
hire a
contract,
long-term?
right? According to
Yeah, it's
the
a 3-year
charter.
contract.
Right.
But like, when we look at it as, you know, as the hiring managers, are you hiring for just the next 3 years? And you're like,
I mean, do you know where you're going to be in 20 years? I don't.
well,
So
I'm, you know,
But I think what you're
hoping
saying
still
is,
around.
if someone is in the twilight of their career, for instance,
Yes.
then you're saying that you know that they wouldn't have an expectation of wanting to be in place for 15 years.
Yeah. And I mean, and I don't know what we want. Maybe we do want, I mean, we've been very well served by hiring very long-term administrators.
Counselor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I just had one thing I wanted to add. I don't see the residents as residents, citizens, or customers because we are an open, we have an open town meeting. I see them as part of the government. They're actually part of the legislative body, so we're actually getting input and participation from our legislative body if we have citizens and residents participate on the steering committee. Just because them as part of the government, helping advise us or helping advise the town council on the selection of a town administrator. That's all I have.
Point well taken. Thank you. So where are we? I mean, it sounds like we have
Let me add one thing. Jonathan made a point about involving the superintendent of schools as part of the screening committee. I will tell you that they owe the town council, because I was on 3 screening committees for superintendent that I can remember, maybe 4.
Oh,
So,
in that case,
they do, if you so decide.
Sounds like there's somewhat of a consensus, but not an absolute consensus from what I'm hearing. Do we bring this back at another time? What's the counselor's thoughts? Yes.
I mean, I personally would love to just kind of think about this and sort of noodle on, like, what does the composition of a committee look like? I think I do think there's some consensus around some areas, but at least for me personally, I don't know that I would say today, this is who should be on the committee.
Right.
I think it's worth.
Yeah, we didn't have vote expected on this.
Yeah,
because we
I think that's
did not
the right
expect a
approach, but
vote,
I
yeah.
think this was helpful to get sort of the sense on sort of where we have, again, agreement on the council and where we have some differences of opinion. And I know personally I would like to kind of ruminate on that and, you know, maybe invite some of us to come back.
I think we're probably, though, pretty clear that we shouldn't be, like, the counselors probably, like, other than me, like, I think nobody really wants the counselors on the committee.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is I think there's consensus on A, yes, a committee, B.
Well, we have to do a committee. We don't have a choice.
Yeah, but B, no town councilors on the committee, and that it's some combination of employees, residents in some way, and peers, as we would define someone like the superintendent. I guess that some combination is probably one where we need to spend some more time on it, and I don't know if we sort of, you know, set the expectation that we come back at the next meeting with, you know, kind of more definitive ideas of how what we'd want to share, or.
Can I propose, sorry if you can't do that. Can I propose, because we also wanted to hear from the search firms and what their recommendations were, which we'll do at our next meeting. But can we just propose, like, if it was to 7 to 9 people, can people just write Steve what they think before our next meeting? Like, we've done this before, just write Steve. So, hey, I think 7 works. I think 3 of them should be the superintendent and Tom and X, and then I think we should write out applications for the 4 remaining. Or I think it should be 9, and these, you know, it should all be members of the public or whatever. Like, write whatever you think, send it to Steve before the next meeting. And then I think Steve, like, then we can share those and then ask the search committee And if you're totally opposed, like, I think that's the basis that we're all going on. So it's kind of, but the makeup is what we're differing on, and so just send that to Steve. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but if you want to.
That works for me.
Right? And that way we can, Steve can make a couple of those charts that you do very well with our ARPA money funds.
Figure out how to do Excel again.
So would it be your idea that in addition to having the presentations on the next meeting, that we would also revisit this as well?
I think so, yeah, because I think we're gonna decide on a search committee, and I think by then, I think once we decide on a search committee, we should know what the search firm, we should know what the search committee looks like. And then they run with it, right? They're gonna run with their part of it.
Okay, thank you. Counselor?
You know, we have an election coming up, and we could end up with at least 2 new people on the council and possibly a third, with things happening. And I can understand the whole issue of having a search, the search firms come in and interview them. But we're weeks away at that point in time, and we're gonna make a decision and not allow the new councilors to get involved. I just think that's rushing things. I don't think there's an urgency to have a committee set up just before an election.
Obviously, 2 of us who are leaving would not argue with you. I would, you know,
Yeah,
I would try to push into having an opinion on this necessarily, but, or do you think otherwise?
My pushback, John, is that the notice was given in December, so already so many months have gone by, right? Steve's last day is July, like, we need to start moving. And so the decision's in front of us. I think we're the council right now, that it is one of our biggest duties. So I would say we're not, like, it might get to April where we actually send it out, right? But I think, like, we keep on pushing the can. We've kind of waited a little too
We're
long.
not picking the person.
So we're not, they're gonna pick the person.
Well, let me just say this, that if I was running for office right now, and then you're deciding something that I'm not gonna have a say in, I would be bothered by that, and maybe you wouldn't, but I'd be bothered by it. We have gonna have at least 2 new members on this council, and put a package together. Here's our thoughts, and then let the 2 new members look at it, review it, and have their input. I think that's the only fair thing to do.
But you know, you and I didn't get to vote on the fire and police contracts last year. Like, you know, there are things that I would have wanted to vote on.
Well, you've said this is the most important decision we've had.
Right, I do. I agree.
You
This
keep
is
on wanting to
why
bring
I
up the
ran
fire and
last
police
year.
budgets. This is an important decision, and it could become an issue in this election. I would make it an issue in this election, to be honest with you.
Well, there's not an election, so it doesn't much matter.
But they're gonna be new members, so we should be getting their input.
Well, let me ask you this, what if there's another new member due to a special election X amount of months down the road? Do you wait for
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah.
Do you wait then?
No, at that point in time, I think we would take action. You know, that's what the situation is. I don't think we're gonna wait till after a special election.
Just curious. And, you know, you'd also probably want to think about, what if someone serves on the search committee and then decides to run? Is there any problem with that? Anyway, Counselor.
I think we can't lose perspective here on this. What we're talking about is just literally the structure of a search committee. And the reason that I wanted to have this discussed tonight is so that going into the 24th, we'd be able to get the feedback from the search firms and hear what they have to say. I think Maureen's suggestion is great, Steve, for you to kind of compile information, and I would assume that would be part of our meeting materials we'd receive in advance. We could all review that and see other perspective even coming into the 24th. Then we can also say, hey, in your experience, what is the composite? What's the most successful composition generally in this sort of work? And I think ask them, pose the same question. You're both going to be asked that, search firm, so be ready for it, and see what they have to say. But then at that point, all we're doing, and that's the end of March, all we're doing then is potentially voting on this, like how many seats and what the general composition is. We then have to post that and wait for people to apply. So I don't think it's likely that this current iteration of the town council will even ultimately select the search committee folks, because we need to give a few weeks normally. I think Sherry would speak, probably at least 3 weeks, I think it is. Once we post something for people to apply for it. So I think probably one of the first functions of whatever iteration of the town council is after April 22nd would be to select those folks. I think that's a reasonable compromise. We're keeping the process moving forward without even, hand picking who we want those 7, 9, 12, whatever people to be. That seems like the sweet spot there. So I don't think anyone coming on. I'm quite confident Attorney Chines is going to be here, and I'm quite confident. I mean, I always say that. Yeah. Councilor Chines is going to be here. I'm quite confident.
I take pride that I'm not an attorney on the council.
It's the tie.
And I'm quite confident the other two candidates are going to be sitting at these seats, come after April 22nd. But the composition of that council at that point is then going to be making the decision, right? Ultimately, they're going to be appointing the folks, and so I think it's okay what we're doing here. We do have a responsibility. It is an important responsibility, and I think we're at least putting things into motion at I think a conservative rate, but at a point where they will have the benefit of being able to select, this whoever that is, the seven of us, 7 of them, whatever. Well, that group will have the benefit of then selecting those people for the search committee. Mind you, that's going to be May, and then from there, we're then asking for applications, as I said last time. That probably gets us into mid-June at the earliest. Is the search committee going to be spending a lot of time through the month of July? I know any of our boards, committees, and commissions, July and August become tough times to be able to have critical mass. So I don't think, I think the sooner we can kind of move this along so they can at least get started. They say they're installed in May, we can post for the position. Then, hopefully by early June, they're at least looking at resumes, before we hit summer hits. I think that matters. We can't just, have this go on in perpetuity. We have to have some sort of structure. But I respect what you're saying, Councilor Carney. A lot of attorneys today. Councilor Carney, I respect what you're saying too, but I think...
You're not getting close to that cliff again, are you?
But I think this is the sweet spot of that in a process that's, the timing is less than ideal. Steve, you should have let us know a year ago.
I was thinking of shortening the time frame. Would have been better.
Councilor Chines.
I completely agree with that. I mean, I think Councilor Butt's suggestion around process makes sense. And, the reality is, we're going to spend the next 2 meetings, going through budgets for fiscal year 2026, which will take place at a time when, again, at least 2 of the individuals sitting here today are not going to be on the council. I mean, we always have this issue where the composition of the council is addressing things that affect the future when there may be a different composition in place. This happens to be one example. I think it's a relatively low-stakes example because, again, we're just talking about not even the composition of the committee in terms of people, we're just talking about the composition of the committee in terms of roles. I think it's very reasonable. If I were on the other side of this and running, I don't know that I would have a problem with it. I think it's just the reality of where we are in the cycle.
Councilor?
Just a quick question for either Mr. Mayo or Mr. Mullen. In terms of, because with all of this, we're definitely going to get to June 30th with a very high likelihood that we do not have a town administrator in place. What is sort of July 1? What is do we announce an acting town administrator, or is there isn't clearly, there isn't a defined succession plan now, or an automatic one? It has to be, we have to decide on that, or
Yeah.
we have to appoint somebody as an acting?
You do.
Okay. Interim. I don't know how you would, however you phrase it, but it is unlikely. So we'll have 2 important decisions. We have
Now that decision, I think we should wait until the next council is constituted for that.
Oh yeah. That would be. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay, can we move on, councilors, to letter E, proposed state legislation on remote participation? I think
Sure.
we're going to get a short
very, very short
presentation from
So I want to thank Councilor Butt for bringing this to my attention at the last meeting. It seems like this is deja vu all over again with the legislature. Every year we run into this kind of frenzy at the end of the Attorney General's order, which we've still been running on, to allow for remote participation and to allow for and hybrid meetings. And I got to say that I think Wakefield did a great job of getting out in front of this. I mean, our councils, our boards met where others didn't. Some of our surrounding communities for a year, their Board of Appeals didn't meet. Does that mean things didn't get built? No, they got built. They got built without building permits, caused all sorts of trouble along. But we did a great job. So, over the years, this has happened. A couple of years ago, our ability to have remote participation actually expired, and we had to cancel some meetings a couple of times, and then it got reinstated over the weekend. So so there were a couple of bills. They are fairly identical. One is at the House and one is at the Senate, and I read them. I shared them with Town Council Mullen, and although I wasn't all that crazy about the remote participation portion, I guess I could live with it, although I really liked what the governor had to say better. I thought that her part of her Municipal Empowerment Act, although I don't think that'll be done by the end of the month either. I thought that she had a much better way of looking at this and was very consistent with what we have now. The two bills that were sponsored in the House and in the Senate, again, I thought they were okay. I didn't love them. I do think that we should be consistent, and maybe this wasn't, maybe I felt in my mind that maybe there was some inconsistency. One board in town might do one thing, one board might do another thing, and I think it really should be the town council should set the tone because they're the leading body in town. But then I got to the end of each of them, and in each iteration that has come through from the legislature that I've read before, they talk about in a town having a representative town meeting. And I gotta say, I almost glossed over this in this iteration. And it said, in a town having a representative or open town meeting form of government. A couple of things happen here is that the town moderator seems to kind of make the call after consultation with the select board or town council in our case, and the Board of Health and maybe Public Safety, but it certainly is the town moderators kind of call to initiate that. I called our town moderator and said that gave him way too much power, way too much authority, and also too much responsibility, because as the town moderator goes through, the town moderator kind of said something in a printed, legible, easily understandable format, and it contains that they will have hybrid or a remote participation, and it goes through a whole bunch of iterations where registered voters need to register with the town clerk not less than 48 hours in advance, that they want to participate remotely. I don't see how that works in an open town meeting, because I'm not so sure. I might have 4 people in my home. Oh, I've got 4 votes here, this IP address, how does it work? How do we count? I don't know how we would count on bond issuances, if that ever happened on an open town meeting. Just seems a little unwieldy. And then what really kind of struck me is that after everyone, let's say it was adopted, and I know we may adopt it, we may not adopt to do this. We may not opt in to do it, or the moderator may not opt in to do it. But at the end of that, it says that once this has all been set up, and prior to taking up any business at a remote or hybrid town meeting, and after a quorum has been terminated, we don't have a quorum, we don't have to worry about, the meeting shall vote on whether to commence the business of the meeting using remote or hybrid access. If the town meeting votes to continue, then the town meeting shall proceed. If the town meeting votes not to conduct the town meeting by remote or hybrid means, then the town meeting shall be adjourned without further action. I can see this spinning around. Everyone got in here and got ready to roll, and we're not going to do it. I'm sorry, because people have reached out to me and they feel that, hey, some people can't get to town meeting because of health care issues or child care issues, or it's too hard to get there, and feel this is a better way to do it. I'm sorry, but open town meeting, to me, I don't know how else we handle it without being unwieldy. So I'm very happy to write a letter because I think remote has done very well and we need to do it. I just couldn't in good conscience, without the authority of the board, of the council, saying that, you know, we were going to back these two bills. And that's kind of what it was in your packet, so hopefully you read it. It was kind of interesting. I don't know if Tom wanted to add anything, because he and I have talked about this.
I love the idea of just claiming as big a family as you want for purposes of your household voting. It's sort of like the way the Soviet Union used to cast 3 votes in the General Assembly, you know, because two of their socialist republics were supposedly independent. Yeah, I think, well, all of this shouldn't obscure the fact that at the end of the month, we lose the benefit of remote participation as we've come to know it since COVID. And I think what we do now is great. It maximizes the public participation, including, for the first time, people who physically can't get here. And I don't want to lose that, because if we do lose it, if we get past 331 without new legislation, we default to the prior rules, which include that you can't have remote participation in a meeting unless a quorum is present physically, including the chair, and B, any member of the public body who is not physically present has to be excused with a good reason. He has to come up with a good reason why he can't be there. I hope we don't go back to those old days. We've all gotten used to this system, the public's gotten used to it, but I certainly agree that applying those rules to an open town meeting is just an invitation to chaos.
Comments?
So we don't want it to expire and we don't want chaos. Is there any middle ground here?
Well, we want legislation that doesn't purport to expand remote participation to open town meetings, which, again, is what we've got now. The system we have now should simply be continued indefinitely. It was a successful experiment.
So Steve, on that, I think your letter is great. Can I just make some edits?
Oh,
if you
sure,
wouldn't mind?
absolutely.
I think, could you put in how much we spent ARPA money to make more meeting rooms, you know, hybrid and remote specific? I think that's important for our legislators and for the bill sponsors to know. And then also how many, because we're actually unique that we do have remote meetings for our committees. So can you add a sentence about, you know, we have over 40 committees and most of them still just are remote. They don't meet in person, and it's been really successful, particularly for, you know, working parents.
And I also will punch up the language where all those meetings are recorded.
Yes.
So, and no one does that.
Yeah.
Virtually no one. You can see any meeting.
I don't remember. I was talking to a friend who was like, "You have remote meetings?" And I was like, "For other than town council," and they didn't. So I think it's unique, and I think to share that, and then the money we spent to make it, and that it is really popular. It's actually included, you know, more people applying for positions, for appointments. And I think the way that you handle it is fine. Like, I think open town meeting is untenable. I think that's a good word to use. So I really appreciate you writing this. I think for us just to go on the record of what we've been doing is working, please let us just continue it without a break.
Councilor Dabrowski?
I completely agree with both you, Mr. Mayo, and Town Council Mullen. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just keep it going indefinitely. I think that the letter achieved that, Steve. I would just highlight the fact, you know, that we have not just recording, but also the archiving. So we have a lot of folks who go back and watch these meetings even afterwards too. And I can't think how many times we've gone back to a prior meeting and watched that. You know, minutes are one thing, but you know, under the law, minutes can be pretty limited, frankly. Right. But going back and watching the discussion, that's really important. There's a value add to that, to the citizenry, that you lose when you don't have that opportunity. The only thing I might suggest with this letter is, if it is the consensus of this body that what we're talking about here makes sense, then I think, Steve, you can certainly include in here that and in consultation with the town council, endorses this approach.
I'd say on behalf of the town.
On behalf,
council.
well, and in your capacity as town administrator too, you could speak to this issue, but also I think on behalf of the town council, I think it just adds more to it, so it's not just a single voice, but it's rather the voice of the entire body and really the whole executive branch of our government, saying that this is critical for us.
Councilor Chines.
Thank you. So I agree with the concepts and the content of the letter, and I think it's the right message. I will say this is going to be probably a little bit of an unpopular opinion, Mr. Mayo and Mr. Mullen. I actually would like the state to put some thought and effort into what a viable remote participation option in an open town meeting would look like. This legislation, the two proposed pieces of legislation, the House and Senate, don't do that, in my opinion. I think they're flawed in some very significant ways that you've well described. But I do think that it does, we have this sort of continued open question around, is there a way where open town meeting could be made more accessible to people? And I think that that's not something that, we as a community should be able or asked to solve on our own. But I would love to have, the legislature create a commission or the Division of Local Services spend some time in actually thinking through like what a model could look like. Again, not fodder for this letter. I don't think we want to confuse what is a very, very, strict timeline that's coming up in terms of the current meeting flexibilities that we have. But I do hope that it's something that, at a state level, there's some thought put into in the future.
To me, it was very interesting. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
Oh, Councilor.
The problem with that, Jonathan, I don't trust the people at the state to come down with an idea, because then they'll force it on us.
I don't think they need to force it on us.
They come up with ideas, and then all of a sudden they're passing legislations, and they say, well, you were all for it. It's kind of like, it bothers me that.
No, I'm just saying that I think there is potentially a technological way where it could be done. I don't think that every town and city on their own has the wherewithal to come up with that technology. And, we figured out a way to have, kind of accessible meetings for things like town council meetings and so forth. It's an area where, in a commonwealth where this is a form of government that exists for many, many communities, there should be some opportunity to evaluate and investigate, again, the technological and logistical options of how it would be done. Because, again, I don't think we could do that on our own in Wakefield.
Right, I worry about them doing it.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
What I found very interesting here is that in the MMA blast that went out on this, they say that they're trying to make the remote, ability permanent, and they even say would make these options permanent, including for representative town meetings. That was in their blast. Yeah. So when I saw the legislation, I said, okay, representative, I don't really care, but I read it and I said, how can this say or? It was kind of misleading, and I like the MMA. I enjoy them. I thought it was kind of an inaccurate blast to come out.
Can you also send a copy to Adam at the MMA?
Yes.
The letter?
Yes.
Please send one
Yeah.
to them or the
Yeah.
policy committee or
Yeah.
whoever sent out that email.
Yeah.
I think it was just bad drafting.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
didn't catch it.
As happens in
Yeah,
this space.
well, they're still dockets. Like they haven't even assigned
Yeah.
bills to committees yet. So I don't have high hopes that this is going to get done
Right.
before the 31st.
I frankly hope they, as they've done in the past, just via an emergency, whatever.
Like a
push
1
forward
year.
what we have.
Yeah.
For a year again, but maybe tackle this earlier, not in.
Not 2 weeks before
Not
the
2
end of the
weeks
month.
before the end of the month.
So it sounds like we have consensus though, in terms of your,
I get it, and I'll
next
send that
steps,
around.
Steve.
Okay. I'll also bring it up to the legislators tomorrow morning at the Chamber Legislative Breakfast.
Terrific. Thank you.
Do you need a vote, Steve?
It's not anticipated, that's why I don't know that we should.
I'm comfortable with the direction.
Okay, I believe we're then at item 10, town meeting referrals. A is, am I correct?
You are correct.
And referral to the planning board, proposed public way acceptance.
And you could actually do all of these in one vote if you wish. This is part of the ministerial duties of the town council. It does not in any way say you're endorsing anything.
Right.
The first one is as you know, the entrance to the new high school is going to be altered. And because there is some change in land ownership and an alteration of a public way and an easement, that needs under our charter to be referred to the planning board. Item number 2 is that there will be, and I say will be, a new floodplain and overlay district in Wakefield. We actually got notified by FEMA in January that, really at the end of January, that we needed to do this or people that have flood insurance will lose it by July 1st. So it really didn't give us a lot of turnaround time there. So our town engineer did a great job in turning this over and working with Town Council Mullen. So that needs to go to the planning board, and that'll be voted on at town meeting. And item C is the proposed marijuana zoning bylaw amendment, which is a citizen petition, which again needs to be referred to the planning board. And because it was endorsed by the planning board last time around, it can go back to them for a second bite of the apple. You can do them all in one vote if you want, Mr. Chairman.
Steve, the basin, are we going to include that?
I don't think we needed to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we refer to the planning board the proposed public way, Farm Street right-of-way alteration and DCR easements, the floodplain overlay district, and the proposed marijuana zoning bylaw amendments.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Aye.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dabrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
And I am a yes. That is 7-0. Sherry? Next, we have 11 licenses for Wakefield Convenience Store for Elm Street.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the common victular license for Wakefield Convenience Store at 4 Elm Street.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Yes.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dabrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Sherry, that is 7-0. Item 12, appointments. Our first is a building inspector vacation replacement.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we appoint the building inspector vacation replacement as is common practice.
Second, and that's the appointment of John L. Barrett.
Correct. Motion seconded for John L. Barrett. Any discussion? Seeing none. Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Yes.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dabrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Sherry, 7-0. We have an applicant for Human Rights Commission tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we appoint Kathleen Shine Kane to a position as Commissioner on the Human Rights Commission.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion?
Just to say, as the liaison to the Human Rights Commission, there's a couple of vacancies. That's why we're doing this off-cycle. And Professor Kane is great. She's gone to a lot of the events, went to the event last week. So she will be a great member of this committee.
Very good. Thank you, Counselor Butt. Motion seconded. Counselor Vincent, let's go to the vote.
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Yep.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dabrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That is 7-0, Sherry. And thank you to Ms. Shines Kane for putting her name in. Donation, we have a donation of $225 to the Council on Aging.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the donation of $225 to Council on Aging with thanks.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion on the donation? Seeing none. Counselor Vincent.
Yes.
Counselor Butler.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Dobrowski.
Aye.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, 7-0. Sherry on the gift. We have fiscal year warrants. Item 14.
All right, thank you, Madam McLean. The first one is number 26. The amount is $2,926,689.68. Next one is number 27. It's $6,728.25. That was for emergency management. Number 28 is $5.359,664. Warrant number 30 is $4,857,952.87. Warrant number 32, $14,973,973,861.68. I'll note that $10 million of that is under town council, and that is for Wakefield Memorial High School projects November, December, and January expenses. Also, there's $1.9 million of that is for the light department, and that's part of the Massachusetts Municipal Wholesale Electric Company power purchasing and substation expenditures and administrative fees. And then the last one is number 34, and that's $7,846,968.01. Of note there is $1 million of the DPW amount is for WMRA, our February sewer services charge. And and then there's $1.8 million under the light department. Some of that is for power line contractors and things like that. That's it. And I'm done with warrants after 3 years. Thank you.
And thank you very much for handling those for those 3 years, Counselor. Item 15 is approval of minutes from our 2/24/2025 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the February 24th, 2025 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion second. Any changes, discussions? Seeing none. Counselor Vincent. Are you good with the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Counselor
Yes,
Butler.
said yes.
Okay, Counselor Butler.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Dobrowski.
Aye.
Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Carney.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Sherry, that is 7-0 on the minutes. Any announcements from counselors this evening? Counselor Chines.
Just a couple of quick things. I wanted to mention a couple of events coming up. The Friends of BB Library is having an open house for members next Sunday, or this Sunday, March 16th from 2 to 4 at the library. And following that, Monday is St. Patrick's Day, and so the Senior Center will be doing their annual St. Patrick's Day lunch from 12 to 2, which is always a good time. And will include an appearance by the Palms, which is always exciting. Finally, I just want to pass along some congratulations to the Galvin Middle School Science Olympiad team who competed in the state tournament on Saturday and did exceptionally well. A ton of medal performances by the group of kids and a lot of really outstanding performances by the whole group. And so it was great to see them do so well and great to see them really distinguish themselves on behalf of our community.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Vincent.
He looks frozen.
You look a little bit frozen, Counselor Vincent.
Travel for Botox?
Very good. Yeah, I just wanted to say something. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Did
Now
they
we
lose
can.
me? They lost me. Oh, I just wanted to say on a personal note that it'll be 18 years ago tomorrow that my wife Tracy suffered a stroke. And I just wanted to, she's asleep by now, but I just wanted to shout out to her to let her know how proud I am of her and how much I love her with her determination, courage, and perseverance over the last 18 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Butt.
Just want to mention, as I said earlier, Councilor Dombrowski and I went to the International Women's Day event last Wednesday, which was a great event, and thank you WCAT for recording it. You can find it on YouTube or their website, and it's a great panel to watch. So thank you to the HRC and thank you to WCAT.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Dobrowski.
just want to remind everyone that Inspire Cafe is open and going strong. They have phenomenal food, great drinks, smoothies, coffee, whatever you like. I think it's one of the hottest spots in town right now. So if you haven't checked it out, please do. I think the best part about it is the staff, hands down. But an added benefit is the amazing menu they have. They work really hard, they're really committed. It's service with a smile, and it's a really good way to spend a day. So definitely, if you can stop in, it's a great way to start your day, especially. And I highly recommend the granola. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. I don't see any other announcements. Ergo, matters not anticipated for agendas. Does anybody have any of those?
I had one thing, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. Could have been under announcements. I know. I'm
You know what
sorry.
I call these.
I know. I know. On March 22nd in the morning, there may be a, I'm going to call it a budget workshop with the schools regarding their budget. So I will know more. The date has been rumored. I know that some finance committee members may be there. So I share that. Time to be determined. But it is Saturday morning to talk about their budget. They, under the charter, school department does need to come in front of our board to see their budget, but they are planning to have some sort of a workshop that day. So I thought I'd throw that out there, even though I don't have an exact date and time. So,
Is
and if
this
you wanted,
a usual practice or a bit unusual, would you say?
a little of both.
Okay.
Maybe.
They usually have a public hearing. As
Right,
part
but
of the
this is not a
budget
public
process.
hearing. This is something
Right,
different.
this sounded a bit different
Yeah,
to me,
this is-
Counselor
this is a
Chines.
little
That's
bit
why I
different,
asked, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
This, then, are they still planning to come before us?
Oh, yeah, they still have to under the charter and present to us. This is a different item.
Oh, the school, they have to come with the school budget to us?
Yes, per the
Yeah.
charter, they need to present it to
We
the
don't
town.
actually vote on it,
We
but
don't
they
vote
have
on it.
to.
but they
Right,
need
yeah,
to
yeah,
present it.
yeah. No, because I always told them, I'm like, I don't know why you're going there. They know.
They don't either. So, Counselor, or I'm sorry, Town Administrator, is that something with open invitation? People?
Yes, I'll send out information when I have it.
Okay,
But that
okay.
sounds like that. And
Great.
at the next meeting, Mr. Chairman, I plan to bring the MBTA lease for the rail to trail.
Really?
Yes. Many years later, Tom?
Wow.
Tom, yeah.
Well, this is the highlight of the meeting. Of this
Yeah,
now,
I
Steve.
saved it till the end.
Talk about burying the headline.
Somebody just asked me about that Wednesday's event, and I was like, I'll ask Steve, and then I forgot. So I can
I
take
know.
credit for getting
You
it
can
done.
take credit.
Yeah.
There you go.
Nice work.
Telepathic.
I said, I think so.
So as soon as we sign the lease, those bars can come down?
Yeah, I guess they could, or people can use it. People are using it now. Yeah. It would be open for use in that area,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
As well as moving and building the rest of it.
Okay, I believe that brings us to entertaining a motion to adjourn.
So I move that we adjourn this meeting tonight to reconvene at our next on March 24th at 7 p.m.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Affirmative.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dabrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
And I am also in the affirmative. Thank you all for your participation tonight. Have a good rest of the week. And I will close this meeting at 10:02 p.m.